Morning. For the record, my name is Tanya Fernandez Anderson, the District 7 City Councilor. I am the chair of the Boston City Council Committee on Ways and Means. Today's hearing is being recorded. It is being live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-TV and broadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, and FiOS Channel 964. The Council's budget review process will encompass a series of public hearings that begin in April and run through June. We strongly encourage residents to take a moment to engage in this process by giving testimony for the record. You can do this in several ways: attend one of the hearings and give public testimony. We will take public testimony at the end of each departmental hearing, and in this case, we will take public testimony after round one of questions from councilors, and also a hearing dedicated to public testimony, which already occurred. The full hearing schedule is on our website at boston.gov/council-budget. You can give testimony in person here in the chamber or virtually via Zoom. For in-person testimony, please come to the chamber and sign on the sheet near the entrance. For virtual testimony, you can sign up using our online form on our Council Budget Review website or by emailing the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov. When you are called to testify, please state your name and affiliation, residence, and limit your comments to just 2 to 3 minutes, depending on my discretion if need more, if it allows everyone else to comments, to ensure that all comments and concerns can be heard. Email your written testimony to the committee at ccc.wm@boston.gov. Submit a 2-minute video of your testimony through the form on our website. For more information on the City Council budget process and how to testify, please visit the City Council's budget website at boston.gov/council-budget. Should anyone need a Cantonese or Mandarin interpreter, they are located in the back to the right of the room. Dockets today's hearing is on dockets 07600762. Orders for the FY24 operating budget, including annual appropriations for departmental operations for the school department and for post-employment benefits OPEB. Docket 0763 to 0765 to 0766. Orders for the capital fund transfer appropriations, docket 0764, 0767 to 0768. Orders for the capital budget, including loan orders and lease purchase agreements. Our focus area for this hearing will be an overview of the FY budget for the Mayor's Office of Housing, Fair Housing, to include Boston Planning and Development Agency, or at least a representative here to answer any questions that go hand in hand with Mayor's Office of Housing or any housing planning, and Grow Boston. Our panelists for today's hearing are Sheila Dillon, Chief of Housing; Rick Wilson, Deputy Director of Administration and Finance; Robert Terrell, Director of Fair Housing; Jeff Thomas, Special Assistant to the Chief of Planning from BPDA. I am joined by my colleagues, Councilor Murphy from District 9, Councilor Murphy at large, Councilor Braden, District 9, and Council President Flynn, District 2. For our format, first I will go to my council colleagues for a brief opening, just 30 seconds each. Then to the administration for their presentation. You will have 20, unless you need more, minutes to present. Then we'll go directly to my council colleagues for first round of line of questioning, and then to public testimony. Once we're done with the public testimony, round 2 for questioning, if time allows. I'll be calculating in terms of how much time is left to allow each counselor to have their time, and if time allows, then a third round; if not, closing statements or wrap up. Without further ado, Councilor Murphy, you have 30 seconds to give your opening statement.
Sure. Thank you, and thank you for the panelists for being here. Looking forward to the conversation. Also just want to make sure, last year, we had a lot of ARPA funds, and they're going to run out if they haven't already, so making sure that we have the resources in the budget. We know cost of living, interest rates, high rents, all of that. So you all have very stressful jobs. Housing people is so important, so thank you for that. And I do just want to give a plug. I love that Grow Boston is part of it. There is a community garden on the street I live in District 3, even though I do love Alston Brighton. But in Dorchester, the gardens are so important. And I think it ties into, you know, the quality of life, and housing and food is so important. So thank you for this. And Chair, I do have a veteran military spouse flag raising at 11. I'll be stepping out, but I will be back in. So thank you.
Thank you, Council Murphy. Council Braden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the interest of time, it's really good to see you folks again. Housing, probably the #1 issue in the City of Boston and in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. So I look forward to the conversation, and thank you for all your work. I know you're working incredibly hard to make more housing available that's affordable for our residents in Boston and in our neighbourhoods. Thank you.
Council President Flynn, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the panel for the important work you're doing. Housing stability remains one of the most important issues facing our residents. The Mayor's Office on Housing takes on the critical task of ensuring residents can live in our city. We also need to work closely with the Office of Fair Housing, ensuring that residents have equal access, equitable housing, and that housing laws are followed. For the BPDA, it's also critical that we center decision-making during this development process and that it is fair, equitable. And just finally, give a shout out to Grow Boston. A lot of residents depend on this food, environmental friendly food, especially our seniors and persons with disabilities. So thank you all for being here, for the important work you do, helping the residents of Boston.
Thank you, Council President Flynn. Good morning. You know what to do. I don't have to instruct you.
Great. Thank you so much for having us this morning, and we are excited to be here. So, for the record, my name is Sheila Dillon, and I am Chief of Housing for the Director and the Director of the Mayor's Office of Housing. Testifying with me today is Rick Wilson, as was mentioned. And we have many MOH senior managers in the audience to answer any questions you may have. And including Shawnee Fletcher from Grow Boston, which has already been mentioned a few times. And we also have Joe Wolf from the Boston Housing Authority, and as was mentioned by Councillor Fernandez-Anderson, Jeff Thomas from the BPDA. So we would like to give a quick overview of the work that we accomplished in fiscal year 23 and some of our goals on 24. And then if it's pleasing to you all, Rick will then go over the budget in more detail. So just to refresh, as you know, councillors, MOH cuts across our work cuts across 6 strategic areas: creating and preserving affordable housing, ending homelessness, strengthening home ownership opportunities, supporting our renters, and managing and disposing of city-owned property, and promoting urban agriculture and food production through the Grow Boston initiative. Before turning it over to Rick, as I mentioned, I'd like to go over some of our highlights of last year and talk about the upcoming year, which we are all very excited to begin. First, I'd like to talk about housing development. We've had tremendous success over the past year creating affordable housing, and I do want to thank all of you that are here and the city councilors that are not for really supporting this work. We have permitted over 1,100 income restricted units, which is a very high, solid number for us. We also awarded over $67 million in our annual funding round, which will create or preserve an additional 800 units of deeply affordable housing. We continue to fight displacement through the Acquisition Opportunity Program, and we help BHA move forward on the replacement of 353 obsolete public housing units. Finally, we are advancing the Green New Deal by issuing an RFP to fund deep energy retrofits in large affordable housing projects. And this was announced in Brighton just several months ago. Looking forward to fiscal year 24, we intend to permit at least another 1,000 units of income restricted housing and to leverage ARPA funding to create hundreds of affordable units on large city-owned lots and to continue to fund acquisitions. We will also double down on our efforts to recruit and support local and MWBE developers for our projects, and will seek to significantly increase resources for affordable housing by lobbying for the passage of the property transfer fee home rule petition at the State House. And I want to thank you all for signing off on the transfer fee and sending up to the State House, and I look forward to working with you to get that passed. This slide shows our affordable housing production and preservation spending over the last 4 years. As you can see, we are supporting projects across every neighborhood in the city, and we can certainly give you this information in any way that you would like it. We do look over multiple years just to give a better snapshot, because it just tells a more detailed and more a fuller story than just looking at one particular year. Looking on to homelessness and supportive housing, in fiscal year 23, we continued to house hundreds of homeless adults, veteran, youth, and families. We have over 470 new units of homeless units in construction, including 330 units with specialized services. 2 of our recent projects are shown here: Eileen's house in Dorchester and 37 Whale Street in Roxbury, which will be home for families that are coming out of homelessness and with the right services and the supports that they need to be successful. I'm very proud that we've been awarded our largest ever HUD Continuum of Care grant to support our work on homelessness, as well as, very, very exciting, 2 weeks ago, we were also awarded $16.5 million grant from HUD to address our unsheltered population here in Boston. That was a very, very competitive grant, and I really want to thank the staff who worked hard on that and made that happen. In fiscal year 24, we're pushing to house another 1,000 homeless individuals, and we're also going to move 300 additional homeless units into construction. We'll also be able to implement the new unsheltered grant and issue updated new plans to guide all of our homeless efforts, including finalizing our family plan and updating our plan for individuals and youth. Looking at our home ownership efforts, which I know many of you are interested in, so far this year we have provided home ownership education to over 1,000 residents. And while it's great to educate folks that want to become homeowners, it's as important to help them actually realize home ownership. To that end, we've helped over 300 first-time home buyers with down payment assistance, the One Plus Boston Mortgage Program, and the first-generation home buyer match savings program. We're also creating new home ownership opportunities with 100 units permitted or completed this year. And once folks become homeowners, we are there to support them. We have funded home repair and heating system projects throughout the city, especially for our seniors, and provided foreclosure prevention services to hundreds of households. Looking at the photos here, the one on the left is one of our new homeownership projects on Norwell Street in Dorchester. And the one on the right, it's important, is an emergency porch repair that we funded for a senior homeowner. And I laugh when I look at the home ownership, the porch repair, but it is so important. If seniors are going to be able to age in their properties, they really do need to have safe grab bars, safe porches, safe stairs. So we spend a lot of time making sure that the improvements that they need are done properly and of high quality. This year, we're going to push as many homeownership projects into construction as possible, and we have a very healthy pipeline, one that I've never seen before, of 580 homeownership units in pre-development that we need to get to the finish line. Again, councilors, this slide shows home buying financial assistance spending by neighborhood and race and ethnicity. As you can see, this assistance is really benefiting communities of color, with 64% of these resources going to BIPOC households. We did the same analysis for homeowner rehab spending by neighborhood. and race, and this slide shows the same for our home repair programs, with 68% of our assistance going to BIPOC households and 69% of our funding going to Mattapan, Dorchester, and Roxbury, where many of the homeowners don't have as high incomes and really do need the assistance. Housing stability is some of the most important work we're doing, especially as we continue to see rents increase and a lot of properties change hands. In fiscal year 23, we've distributed over $6.3 million in rental relief funds to help over 1,300 households stay in their homes, and helped another 5,000 residents with housing stability and housing search services. This is done by a very mighty team that's sitting right behind me, and many, many dedicated nonprofit organizations. We've also advanced the rent stabilization home rule petition to the state legislature for approval, and once again, I do want to thank the City Council for your help with that. In fiscal year 24, we will continue to provide financial assistance and services to renters facing eviction and housing instability, and we'll expand our emergency hotel and shelter program for displaced households, recent arrivals, fire victims, and survivors of violence. This slide shows how our fiscal year 23 rental relief fund spending, how we spent it by neighborhood and demographic groups. We've worked hard to ensure that every community in Boston can access this assistance. As a result, 80% of rental relief payments have gone to BIPOC households. I am wrapping up soon. It's been a busy year. As you know, councilors, in addition to providing funding, surplus land is a critical asset that we use to develop housing and community benefits. Over the past 4 years, we have sold or transferred over 1 million square feet of surplus property, which will create 650 units of housing and over 430,000 square feet of open space, community gardens, or urban agriculture. The chart on the right shows a snapshot of our land inventory, which is always of great interest. As you can see, nearly half of our 1,100 parcels are unavailable or undevelopable. Of the remainder, over 200 parcels are in an active disposition process. So our goal really is not to own surplus property, but to have it used by the community and back on the tax rolls, and to create development and open space that really benefits our communities. We've had real success in recruiting local minority and women-owned businesses for our property maintenance contracts. This year, 6 out of 7 vacant land maintenance contracts were awarded to MWBEs. So we're very, very excited about that outcome, and I really want to thank the staff from REMS for the outreach efforts that they took. We are excited that the EPA is helping to clean up our Lewis Chemical site in Hyde Park. Our staff have been really very aggressive working with federal government and state government, and have just secured a $3.9 million cleanup award. In fiscal year 24, we expect to sell or transfer at least 100 additional parcels of land, and we will also be selecting developers for our first batch of Welcome Home Boston home ownership developments, creating new homes on our smaller sites. As has been mentioned a few times, Grow Boston, the Grow Boston program, which is in the MOH family, has already had a huge impact, helping to create 3 new community gardens and 2 new urban farms last year, and they put out funding for capacity building and innovation food production, partnering with the BHA and BPS to build raised beds and developing new programs to support urban farmers. Pictured here are 2 of our recent projects, Charlestown Sprouts Community Garden and the Edgewood Food Forest in Mattapan, which some of us were at its opening just last weekend or the weekend before. In fiscal year 24, our goal is to create 300 additional raised beds, as we know that there is wait lists at many of our gardens. 4 new community gardens, 3 urban farms, and 1 rooftop farm. And we're going to continue to expand our programming with a particular focus on increasing food production in Dorchester, Mattapan, Roxbury, and East Boston. Finally, I do want to talk some about MOH's efforts to advance diversity, equity, and inclusion in our department, and then I promise to hand it over to Rick to discuss the recommended budget. In fiscal year 23, we engaged our staff in preparing a racial equity action plan to advance DEI goals in our organization, policy, and programs. And we will be implementing this plan over the next year. As I've discussed through the presentation, we continue to work hard to increase the participation of MWBEs in our contracting and development opportunities. I'm proud to report that 43% of our active contracts are with MWBEs, but we know that there is much work to do. So we're conducting even more outreach and working with OEOI to provide technical assistance to help businesses get certified and respond to our RFPs. We've also made adjustments to our hiring processes to recruit diverse candidate pools and remove implicit bias. And we're continuing to ensure that our programs and services are accessible to all communities throughout the city. I know that was a lot, but like I said earlier, it has been a very, very productive year, and we are excited about the new resources being contemplated and the work ahead. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Rick Wilson to present our fiscal year 24 recommended budget. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sheila. Good morning, councilors. For the record, my name is Rick Wilson. I'm Deputy Director for Administration and Finance at the Mayor's Office of Housing. Our FY24 recommended operating budget, including the special appropriation, is $49.2 million. That's a 4.6% increase, just over 10% increase from our FY23 adopted budget. That's primarily due to a handful of really impactful investments in our programs. The biggest one of those is $1.8 million for the City of Boston voucher program. That brings the total funding for that program to $11.6 million. $1 million for rental assistance for tenants facing eviction and housing instability. $1 million for the additional dwelling unit program. This is to provide financial assistance and technical assistance to homeowners who are interested in creating additional units on their property. $750,000 for the emergency housing assistance program that Sheila described, our hotel program for, again, residents facing housing instability or displacement due to natural disaster or violence. $527,000 to adjust some of our personnel cost allocations between our grant funding and our city funding, and then we're going to take the savings in the grant funding and invest that in housing preservation. And $73,000 to hire a housing coordinator to work with partner agencies like Age Strong and Veterans, Immigrant Advancement, and returning citizens to help them with their housing issues. Here's a breakdown of our budget by program area. Thanks to some investments in recent years, our home buyer and homeowner assistance programs and homelessness and supportive housing programs are each approaching $10 million in funding. We're very appreciative of that. Affordable housing development is funded at $8 million. The Office of Housing and Stability, funding for that office has more than doubled to $4.7 million since that office was established in 2017. And there you see at the bottom the voucher program, which is the single biggest city-funded line item in our budget right now. And that's administered by the BHA through an MOA with our office. And as Sheila mentioned, Joel Wolf from the BHA is here if you want to have any questions about that. Or about this next slide, which is about the city's capital funding for FY24. The capital budget includes $47 million in new authorization for BHA capital projects. That includes $25 million for retrofits, energy retrofits at BHA sites, $10 million for Mary Ellen McCormick, $7 million for Mildred Haley, and $5 million for improvements at a number of elderly and disabled BHA projects. This is just a quick look at our external funds. As you know, councilors, most of our funding actually comes from external sources, especially HUD grants. The largest single source is $42.5 million from Continuum of Care funding. That's the largest award we've ever received. Once again, kudos to the supportive housing team for securing that funding. We're also continuing to spend down our one-time COVID relief funding at $34 million in FY24. The remainder of these, except for IDP, are our annual HUD grants. There's no major changes in any of those. Unfortunately, they continue to be flat as costs and need continues to grow. That funding has been flat for many years. And IDPs continues to be an important source for us for housing development and acquisitions, and we expect to spend about $24 million in FY24. So that concludes our presentation, councillors, and I think at that I'll turn it over to Director Terrell from Office of Fair Housing and Equity.
Okay, there we go. Thank you very much. And Madam Chair and members of the committee, for the record, my name is Robert Terrell. I'm the Executive Director of the Boston Fair Housing Commission, and thank you very much for having us appear at this hearing today. The Boston Fair Housing Commission is a very different kind of city agency than you're probably used to interviewing in budget hearings such as this. We are an enforcement agency. And not only are we an enforcement agency in and around fair housing and civil rights, the very existence of our agency was a product of the civil rights movement in Boston. And I just want to take just 1 second to explain what that means. In the late 70s, HUD was sued by the NAACP for the maldistribution of CDBG funds in the city of Boston. And because the city of Boston was responsible for the distribution of those funds, they were pulled into the lawsuit. I won't go through all the mechanics of that lawsuit, but one of the results that the federal court mandated was that the city of Boston should found its own Fair Housing Commission. And so City Councilor Bruce Bowling from District 7, for whom the Bowling Building is named, wrote the legislation in 1982, which this body passed. And in subsequent years, there were amendments and upgrades. So we take the work of the commission very, very seriously. Unfortunately, housing discrimination remains a serious problem in the city of Boston, and unfortunately throughout most parts of the country. We were just in this chamber 2 months ago talking about the issue of bank discrimination and redlining and what the city council could do about that. So this is an ongoing problem. Our protected classes are unfortunately being discriminated against every single day. The work of the commission is based on 5 pillars, 5 specific areas. And if you look at almost any civil rights organization, public or private, you will find these same 5 aspects to their work. First is investigations and enforcement. That is the heart of what we do. That is the engine that drives our work. From intake and review of fair housing complaints, conducting fair housing investigations, assisting in the negotiation of settlements, issuing determinations of no probable cause or probable cause, conducting appeal hearings, and when probable cause is determined, holding an administrative hearing, which is sort of like our version of court, and then making recommendations to our full commission and issuing a commission order to rectify the situation. I've asked my staff to take a look at our Salesforce database, and in a day or two, we're going to have a report for the City Council on the discrimination that has occurred, I would say, over the last 4 or 5 years in the city by City Council district and by neighborhood. So you can see for yourself that this is a citywide problem and no neighborhood is immune to it. Fair housing, education, and outreach. We conduct a series of fair housing trainings in our neighborhoods. We participate in conferences, seminars, and workshops to discuss fair housing best practices, participate in a series of fair housing events every April, which is Fair Housing Month, and we did participate in 6 events this past April. And we also provide fair housing trainings upon request for city departments. And that's going to be increasingly important when we talk about the assessment of fair housing, which has been adopted by the city and calls on all city departments to live up to our ordinance and to the Fair Housing Act. Public policy and special projects, again, to implement the city's assessment of fair housing and the mayor's executive order, to provide staff support for the monitoring committee that will be coordinating meetings with all of those city departments to see if they are in compliance. We work on the passage of other fair housing and civil rights legislation. There is some very interesting civil rights legislation pending at the State House right now that we would like to see passed. We've also undertaken a very interesting research project with the Greater Boston Real Estate Board. In my second week on this job, I had an occasion to meet with their CEO, and I convinced him that we should do a series of trainings for his members about the fact that housing discrimination certainly does injury to the people who suffer that discrimination, but it's also costing his membership money, which is something I would think that they would be very concerned about, that they are in fact losing business opportunities because of their own discriminatory behavior. We are pursuing this with Tufts University, and we hope to have that study in the next few months. Commission-initiated complaints, we don't even have to wait for a complaint from an individual. We can initiate a complaint ourselves, and we have done so, oftentimes based on testing. And a word about testing, we would like in the next year to initiate our own testing program. Right now, we have a contract with Suffolk University. That contract is coming to an end, and we think it would be far more effective and efficient to bring our testing capability in-house. The budget recommendation that has come down might seem a little odd. It's about $460,000 that covers 3 staff people and stipends for our 5 commissioners. There's been some discussion about why that number was reduced. We can get into that later on in the course of the hearing. But a lot of our funding, in fact, comes by way of CDBG. Thank you, Chief Dillon. Again, that was also part of the same legal framework that created the commission in the early 80s by way of the Skinner decision. And also we get FAP funding. We are substantially equivalent to HUD, which means we can provide the same legal protections that the federal government does. And because they can't handle the immensity of the number of cases that would come their way, they pay groups like ourselves and MCAD to investigate cases for them, and they pay us for it. So the discussion that we're having now with the budget office and with classification and compensation is how to sort of mesh all of these resources and get the results that we at the commission think will be necessary for us to carry out our mandate. But we can get into more details as we go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Terrell. Thank you, Commissioner. I think I'll ask my questions first. So today, YJPU will be sharing ideas around adding $10 million to build truly affordable housing, including some money for community visioning around their needs that go beyond housing. In addition, the mayor just released a new IDP proposal, and along with the Coalition for a Truly Affordable Boston, they are pushing for changes. Because Chief Dillon is in this hearing, they are hoping to that us, the councilors, can use today to also push for deeper ability for in the IDP. And I know that Chief Dillon, you are a strong advocate in working beyond working to get the AMIs lowered, to increase the numbers in IDP, and along with advocates and community and the counselors. Advocacy around IDP basically includes that the mayor's new IDP proposal, and this is coming from community advocates, proposal released this past week includes two options that developers for renters units can choose from: 17% at an average of 60 AMI, 60% AMI plus 3% set aside for Section 8 vouchers holders, 15% at an average of 50% AMI plus 3% set aside for Section 8 voucher holders. And essentially, the Coalition for Truly Affordable Boston and Youth Justice and Power Union are hoping that that we, the councilors, can support them in this. And the questions that they have for you is they would like for you to provide a spreadsheet of sources and uses for the FY24 budget for the Mayor's Office of Housing, including the City General Fund, Community Preservation Act, Neighborhood Housing Trust, Inclusionary Development Fund, and external funds. If you can do that in writing, would appreciate it. In terms of the IDP, Chief, I wonder if you, I'm not sure if you're able to answer this today, but in terms of IDP, how has it been, how has it contributed, and have you looked at the data to, how has it contributed to affordable contribution to income restricted housing or deeply affordable? Have you looked at the percentage overall in terms of the need in comparison to what IDP has done?
Sure. So it's a great question, and we have been working with the coalition now over the last year or so on potential changes, and met with them last week. So, and I will get this information to you in detail because we have it. I didn't bring it today because I didn't know that we were going to discuss it, but IDP has been an invaluable program, right? I mean, it's created over 4,000 units of housing without using taxpayer resources. We have been working for the last year or so to look at how we could update the policy. And in part, there's been a lot of conversation that it's not serving our lowest income populations or populations of color the way that it should. So we have been looking at ways to increase or lower the incomes for the particular units being created. You're right. You stated the policy the way that we're thinking about it now. The next step in this we're having a public hearing next week. Then the proposed policy will go to the BPDA board, and then as you may know, it just comes to the City Council for debate. So the way that we approached it is, how can we lower the AMIs? How can we lower the incomes and still ensure that production can move forward in the City of Boston? And so that's what we've done. We really have tried to look at the numbers and say, how much can we ask developers to do before market rate development becomes infeasible, but focused on lowering the AMIs. And to Bob's point, we know that, or we have heard that, and I think Bob's research in his division has found this out, that it has been hard for Section 8 mobile holders to access these units. So by setting aside some of the IDP units for mobile holders of mobile Section 8s, we also think that's good for them, but it's also good for the development. So we think it's a good proposal, but we really look forward to the debate and the discussion.
Thank you. A lot of people talk about the linkage program as though it's something that is happening right now. Where is that process?
Yeah. So the linkage, so the linkage rates were increased. We had a lot of public conversations, hearings on that. It went to the BPDA board, the proposed increases, and the zoning commission several months ago did vote to, one, place the linkage program into zoning, but also to increase the rates. And I'm doing this for memory, but I'll get you over the exact numbers. We've increased the fees that the labs would pay by 100%, and fees that commercial buildings would be required to pay by 50%, and lowered the projects that are that are the trigger point to 50,000 square feet, down from 100,000 square feet. So once again, we worked with consultants and developers and advocates and came up with numbers that we thought would keep commercial development feasible, but at the same time increase the resources for affordable housing. But we can get you the exact numbers.
Thank you. Can you explain for those watching and for me, what is the catchment area? Is it a mile radius, or I've heard different things?
Linkage, or?
Yes.
Linkage is the whole city. So
The whole city.
any commercial building in the city of Boston.
So the funds would go to the one pot?
Yeah, so there's two ways that we spend the money. So we collect the money on commercial developments that trigger the policy. And then the funds are managed by the Neighborhood Housing Trust, and the city council has a representative. Used to be then Councilor Bach, so I'm sure we'll be appointing someone new. But it goes to the Neighborhood Housing Trust, and we have competitive funding rounds where people apply for those funds. That's one way. Or developers that are creating or generating the linkage, and developers, sometimes nonprofits, sometimes for-profits that want to build the affordable housing, come in together and say, we have an obligation, would like to spend it here. And they come in together, once again, to the Neighborhood Housing Trust to say, we have this idea, we have this proposal. Sometimes that's a way to keep the funding in a particular neighborhood where it was generated.
But there's no restriction in terms of the mile radius or catchment area for that development?
No, you may be referring to this, you may not, but inclusionary development allows developers to meet their obligations by creating housing very, very close to the market rate housing within a half-mile radius.
No, I definitely was speaking about linkage.
Okay.
So there are no restrictions in terms of how far you can spend it from the development where originally
No,
was?
there's no restriction.
Okay, thank you. There's what's included in the 39 million, it's 39.7 special appropriations budget, which has also increased from 35 million total spent in encumbered amount?
Yeah, Councillor, so the 39 million is what we used to refer to as our Housing 2030 special appropriation. That's it has grown significantly over the past decade thanks to the City Council's approval of our budget investments. That's most of, if you think back to the slide that I presented, which showed the breakdown of our budget, I mean, that's most of that. The total is 49 million, 39 of that is a special appropriation. So that it roughly kind of follows that. But we can provide you with a more detailed breakdown of just the Housing 2030 fund if you want. It's about $8 million of that is for homeowner and homebuyer programs, $7 million for housing development, $8.5 million for homelessness, and $4 million for housing stability. And then in addition to that, that's where the City of Boston voucher program sits, $11.6 million of that. And it's grown from the $35 million number that you mentioned because of those investments that I highlighted earlier. That's the voucher investment, ADUs, rental assistance, emergency housing assistance program is where those increases are coming from.
Thank you. Yes, I would like that. Thank you. Chief, in looking at overall, and I know you've probably done an assessment over this as pragmatic thinker as you are, I can imagine that you've probably mapped this out. When you think about housing, affordable housing, inclusionary development, and you look at your stock and you say, this inventory specifically impacts this population, and out of this, IDP will impact this population, and then I have this much to go. You look at the average income or the AMI for certain areas or populations that you're trying to address. Would you say that we're developing less than affordable housing more than we are affordable housing?
It's a really very fair question about how do we use our resources to address our housing needs, right? And we think about it, I think about it like 24/7. Are we spending our money correctly? Are we asking developers to do the right thing? And it's a really complicated picture because it's hard to say, for me it's hard to say that one population set, one cohort in Boston should receive this much resource or that, you know, but you have to make those calls and determinations. But I know that so many people want to buy in Boston. Their incomes are slightly higher, right? So we really want to make sure we're investing in home ownership. At the same time, we know we have homeless populations that have no income, and we know that we've got to build permanent supportive housing. But I do think when we look at our rental housing stock, and over the years, a lot of it has been focused on 70% AMI and IDP, and a lot of our new production in rental housing done mostly by nonprofits, but some for-profits. We have really focused on a tax credit of 60% AMI, right? Just that's what the program has required us to do. We've said that we're not building enough for our lower income renters. We know that. So through our funding rounds, we've really tried to give extra points and really work with developers to get the AMIs down to 30, 40, 50%. Of course, it's some 60s too. We do that by income averaging. So we really have been very intentional looking at that issue. And I think the proposed changes to inclusionary development, we really have listened to the advocates who have wanted lower AMIs. And if we look at the 50% and 60% of AMIs that are being proposed, that is an average. So we're looking at a range. So with IDP, if the one door A allows an average of 60, we're looking for incomes of 50, 60, 70, or 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. So we're really looking for a range of incomes. So all of that to say is I think over the last 2 years, we really have tried to think about how to serve our lower income populations that don't have a voucher or that aren't living in a unit with a project-based resource against it. So it's very, very hard, and I welcome people's input on this today. You know, we need to build for our middle class. We need to help people buy homes. We need to house our homeless, but we do really need to be much more intentional that a lot of our renters aren't at 60% AMI. They are a lower income population. They're a lower income population.
I know that you've heard me say this before, and this will be my final question to my colleagues. I know that you've heard me say this before. The average income in Roxbury is $34,000. And so when you look at that, the AMI obviously is also low. 40 and under. So if we look at that, and we say you do the one-third, and I applaud you for this effort, along with the advocates that worked with you. If a third of it, what is the percentage, the AMI for the lowest third?
The lowest third. It depends. There's not one set in stone. We're working with the community and your office and other. So the traditional a third, like the Senhais, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, because I think you're probably more intimately involved in Senhai. It was a third low, like probably 40%, a third middle, and then a third market. The projects that have been done in Nubian have really taken different shapes and forms depending on the type of housing that it is. Some of the third has been home ownership 60 to 80. Some of it's been rental 40, 50, 60. Some of it's been our homeless set aside. So project by project, the one-third has been defined.
Okay. You go as low as a 30% AMI on the lowest third.
Yeah,
sometimes.
Right. Oh, yes. Every project has at least 10%, a 30%. unless it has, we've been working with the BHA and the city voucher program and the federal voucher program and the state on MRVPs. If we can get vouchers when we develop a new project and we can get vouchers to be attached to the units, then we can serve much lower income populations. It's just very hard if there's not any income source at all coming from particular units.
Thank you. Jeff, if you don't mind gracing us with your presence. Councillor Braden, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Always love to get talking about IDPs and percentages. I had a question about, just a quick one on the additional dwelling units program. Is that citywide? Like, my understanding was that Alston Brighton wasn't included, or has that changed? Or was I misinformed?
I believe it is citywide.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
All right. Need to get more information on that.
Just if I could add to that, though, it's, as of right within the footprint of the existing structure, and we are in conversations with fire and the BPDA and communities about structures now outside of the garages, the carriage houses, small properties, but there's a lot of issues to work out.
Yeah, I think, it is another tool in the kit for us, especially when we think about elders who are living overhoused in maybe a two-family. They want to downsize, but there's nowhere for them to go. So if they can create a little additional dwelling unit, then they can rent their home, their two units or whatever. It's a great way, and I think that's an ongoing theme with our aging population, that we have a lot of folks who are overhoused. Their families are grown and left, but they do want to stay in the neighbourhood. But if they sell their house, they get a tidy sum for it. But when they go to buy something, first of all, there isn't supply for homes that are suitable for elders who want to age in place and community. And second of all, they'd blow a lot of their money. The tidy sum would very quickly be diminished by the cost of housing. So are we looking at, I know that we look at Opus and with True Life project, are we looking at really thinking of creative ways so that our elders can stay in the city and stay in their neighbourhoods and age in place?
So first and foremost, let me just say that I love ADUs. I love them, and we really do need to work through some of our outstanding issues and let them flourish. They are good for adult children. They're good for, like you mentioned, seniors that may want to let their adult children with their families have the main house, but they want to be close by. They can support each other. ADUs, and they're gentle. I think Arthur Jemison says they're gentle density, right? You don't feel them as much. So we really do want to advance that this year. The program that True Life, I think you're referencing, is for seniors that are house rich but maybe have fixed incomes, that they can sell their home that they're in and then retire the existing debt on a when they move into a senior facility, and then they've got a very small carry month to month. Mm-hmm. And they do want to do a project in Boston, so we are in conversations with them to find a site still. They are completing one in Newton. Waltham?
Yeah.
Newton. And we would like to see that model come here and do several of them.
Yeah. Because I think we're going to see a tsunami of elders and elder homelessness among folks who are renters as well. Like, that's another huge problem that we're seeing more of. I don't know, have you any thoughts on that?
Seniors that are homeless, did you say, Councillor?
Or the potential to become homeless, as they're maybe they've been long-term tenants for maybe 30 years, and then the folks that they rented from are passing the home on to another generation, and then the younger generation want to sell the house and get out, cash out.
The Office of Housing Stability is receiving so many of those calls, and I'll see if they have got data, and if they do, I can forward it to you. And now we're working with 2 or 3 senior agencies just to work on this particular problem. Seniors that have lived in the same apartment for 25, 30 years, and now these apartments seem to be changing hands at a more rapid clip than I've ever seen. And I probably have 3 or 4 or 5 cases right now too, personally. So we are seeing that. We were pleased that the state just funded 3 of our senior projects that Neighborhood Housing Division put forth. So that was a really good announcement couple of months ago. So we'll start construction on those. We do have a very healthy senior pipeline, but it's not enough for you're right, the changing demographic.
Thank you. So I'm really pleased that in Alston Brighton we have succeeded in getting a nice range of IDPs in new projects. I still feel that one of the biggest challenges is actually getting developers to develop like a family-size unit. We have some success in one or two, but it's really not enough to meet the demand, especially in our neighbourhood where families are competing with students for bigger units. So I don't know, are there any particular initiatives in the department to think about family housing?
Yeah, so we, the Mayor's Office of Housing under Jessica Boatwright's leadership, we're developing a lot of family. That's the majority of what we do is we fund and support the development of family affordable units. One change or one emphasis on the revised inclusionary development policy is that developers would be required to give us 15 or 17 plus 3, right? But of units or square footage, and that way we could negotiate with the developer for larger units. We would be receiving fewer units, but we would be receiving more family units. Because you're right, a lot of the new developments in the city are studios and 1-bedrooms serving young workers, but that doesn't serve families. So we do want to keep that option open.
Very good. Linkage, the other thing that we've done is just when we see labs coming in, asking them to build housing, and some of them tell us to go away, we don't build housing. And so I also feel like in terms of repurposing commercial buildings down, like the office vacant, decreased occupancy in our commercial buildings, office space, are we able to, what's the feasibility in terms of economics to convert some of that into housing, or are we working on that?
So I think we've had the best success when we've been talking to lab developers, and that success has come from community input. Quite honestly, I can think of several instances where developers have come in, and because through a community process, I'm thinking of your neighborhood, like on Everett, Soldiers Field Road, they have said yes to also putting aside some land for housing, or substantially funding affordable housing elsewhere. So we were able to do that 6 months ago. I mean, the market, I think, isn't as robust as it was, but we have seen throughout the city lab developers willing to take on a housing component. Another good example is Chinatown, where they were proposing a lab, but they were also providing a very, very important building on Essex Street for affordable housing as part of the community mitigation. So I do think a lot of the successes have come from the community and have been then memorialized and solidified by city agencies. So you're right to raise it. It's been a good outcome.
Thank you. How are we doing for time, Madam Chair?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Oh. The home repair program, is that means tested, or for elders? What's the threshold for participation in that?
Karen, do you want to come down and just give that? I don't know off the top of my head. Sorry. Karen Rabaza, our new Deputy Director for Homeowner Services. So you should meet her anyways and have her on speed dial if it's okay. Madam Chair, we can just have her quickly answer that question. Thank you. It's okay.
Madam Chair, be right back.
Oh, sure.
Okay, thanks. So incomes associated with that.
Yes. So, good morning. For the record, my name is Karen Rabaza. So, to answer your question with the incomes, So we help anybody that it's really 80% or below for home repairs. We go up to 135% of AMI as well. But we basically help any senior that needs assistance with home repairs.
And what sort of range of things? Is it like heating systems?
Yeah, we do have our Senior Safe program, which is a replacement of their heating system. And we also help with home repairs, maintenance, anything that it has safety related. Roof, windows, basically anything that they need. We might go into a property for a heating system and find out more that needs to be done in a property. So that's when we go in and really assess the property.
So is it a grant or is it a loan?
So we have, for the heating system, we do have a $8,000 grant, but we also have a 0% deferred loan for repairs on the home.
And does it require that the tenant or the resident owner of the home, that they stay for a certain number of years?
So it is an owner-occupied program.
Yeah.
So they will have to stay and live in the property, the owner.
Yeah, I think that's where some people says, "Oh, 7. Is it 7 years or 10 years?" Or?
No, it's for the life of for the deferred loan.
But it doesn't, Karen, correct me if I'm wrong, it doesn't mean that if you got a loan from us and work completed to replace your windows, you can sell. You can sell at any time. You can, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we're not monitoring your behavior.
Yeah, that's
correct.
Good. Yeah, that's just to clarify for folks. And then the other question I had, and I don't know if Joel was still here, but he's up there?
He's out.
The timeline for repairs at the Patricia White.
He just stepped out. He's on a phone call, but as soon as he comes in, maybe we could have him answer
Very
that.
good.
Okay.
I think my time's up. I can reach Joel by phone as well. But thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Council Braden. Council Coletta, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you all so much for your work. Chief Dillon, what an incredible year for you. Congratulations on rent stabilization, transfer fee, and then thank you again for your work in partnership on the Blue Line portfolio. I also want to give a shout out to Councilor Kendra Lara, who was here. Together we were able to give $10 million to preempt displacement by protecting affordability and therefore stabilizing an entire neighborhood. So East Boston is deeply appreciative and grateful for that. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And just a shout out to your incredible team, Rick, Bob, Danielle Johnson, Jessica Boatwright. You all have done an incredible job in assisting us when we have had emergencies happen in our district. I'm thinking about the Princeton Street fire and all of the new arrivals and migrant families that have shown up at East Boston Neighborhood Health Center, as well as the police station. And so I have a couple questions about the emergency housing program. Office of Housing Stability staff capacity, Grow Boston, I love that, and the City of Boston voucher program, and then an additional question about the ADU program. So to go quickly through it to make sure I can try to get all of that and hit all of that. So when it comes to the emergency housing program, we are working through some of the logistics and operational challenges that have emerged in working with NOAA and some other folks to try to house people on a timeline that works for them and trying to find new units that they're able to afford. I would also like to get building collapses included in this. This was something that we brought up during the emergency response hearing when Chief Benson was here. And so I would just like to flag that for you all, that we've seen an increase in building collapses in my district, especially in the North End. So just putting that out there. When it comes to migrant families and new arrivals, again, your team has been doing an awesome job in, throughout the entirety of the night and the day to house these folks. So I'm pleased to see a twofold increase. I think it went from 350,000 to 750,000.
Right?
Did I get that right? Yeah. Okay. How many individuals did we service this year, and what is the anticipated new number, just given the amount of new arrivals that are coming in?
So I'm going to give you the exact number, but Danielle Johnson, who's been leading this work, and I were talking about that. I think this morning you're texting back and forth. There's been roughly 800 or 900 individuals in the last 6 months or so coming from Boston Medical Center, and the police stations and airports, et cetera, and just coming through 311. I'll get you that number. We probably can even get it like before we leave today. So you are correct. We've brought on additional capacity through Family Aid because they have staff and they are able to provide services and, 24/7 services. So we've brought on additional rooms through Family Aid at some of the local hotels. We are watching this daily. I can say with confidence that the state response has been more coordinated, and I know that I think the governor is making some announcements today to really beef up these efforts as well. So I think they're bringing on some folks to really help with this, because the state's been using the emergency shelter system, and it's needed, and they've done an admirable job. It's just, it has needed more resources. Yep. So we have provided, when we get the call, as you know, we provide hotel rooms or safe spaces until these families can access the EA, the emergency assistance through the state, and get into the shelter system. None of it is ideal, but I am happy to say that there hasn't been any families that have been on the street for longer than hours. No one has been on the street for days.
Yeah. And so if we served 900 individuals and we're seeing a twofold increase, so we're expecting that this could cover about 1,800 families throughout the rest of the year.
I think that's right.
Okay.
I think that's right. Now, the NOAA contract has been less expensive for us because we're paying for hotel rooms. They're doing some support services. Family Aid has been more expensive because they're providing 24/7 services and food and links to medical institutions, et cetera. So it's a better service of Family Aid, so it's slightly more expensive.
So you basically answered my next question was, do we anticipate any help from the federal or state government? And do you think that's going to be enough? Because for me, 1,800 families, we've seen X amount come in, we're going to see more. Do you feel like that's going to be able to cover it?
I think, we're watching this weekly, we're watching this monthly, and I know that all of us, including the city council and the administration, is going to step up and do what we need to do, right? We're going to make sure that we have the resources to make sure that no family ends up on the streets or stays in a waiting room longer than they should. So we're going to watch it carefully. There is additional money coming from the feds. The city was just able to secure a grant for some. How
much is that?
$877,000. I think they just secured a grant from the federal government for this particular type of service. So the feds are making some more money available. The state is stepping up, I think, and making more resources, both administrative and financial. So I think we're going to be okay, but it's one that we watch truly on a weekly basis, because some nights 15 families can arrive, and then there'll be two nights where no families will arrive. But Danielle and her shop get the numbers every single morning, and then we go into action to make sure that everybody's okay.
In terms of, and thank you for that.
I was just going to add on the FEMA grants. We got $877,000 was awarded for future costs, and then we're waiting. We applied for we applied for $1.5 million, and we're waiting to hear about that, including the previous costs going. I forget when that goes back to, but we're still waiting to hear on those prior costs in addition to the $877.
When should we know and get the word?
I don't know. Sorry.
Okay, no worries.
No.
Staff capacity. So in your presentation, you said that you served 5,000 individuals. Was that just last year?
Through the Office of Housing Stability?
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
So on average, that's about 14 individuals per day. I'm curious to know about your staff capacity and how many cases each staffer has.
Sure.
And if that's enough.
Okay. I'm going to ask Danielle to come down, Danielle Johnson, who some of you know well because of the cases that have been coming in. But as I said in my presentation, we use staff that are behind us. And I hope they're still there. Oh, no, they had to go back to work. Shoot, they were going to come just for a while. But we're also using contracts through nonprofits. But maybe you can address that.
Good morning. For the record, Danielle Johnson, Director, Office of Housing Stability. We have, our office makeup consists of 3 housing crisis coordinators that work primarily on fielding cases for constituents, whether that's emergency cases or day-to-day housing emergency cases. Per staff, they handle about 40 cases, and that includes a senior staff member who doubles that amount of caseload. And we're currently in the process of hiring a new housing crisis coordinator as well to take on that additional capacity.
So 40 cases per
for housing crisis coordinator. And then we also have staff that do rental relief work, but they also have a small caseload of other emergency housing cases.
Okay, great. And so there was an additional, I just want to get this right, 4.7 million going towards housing stability. So you're going to be hiring another housing crisis coordinator, which we desperately need.
Correct.
You all are, you have too much. You have too much. And so we want to expand the capacity. Is there an opportunity to think about having another person? I mean, how much of this 4.7 million is going towards staff, I guess is my question.
Right, and I also want to add that we're also adding a senior housing crisis coordinator who will be tasked with handling our emergency response, but obviously they'll be handling day-to-day cases as well, but they'll primarily be handling building collapses, fire response, immigrant crisis work. So they'll be doing a lot of that as well. But in terms of staff, the budget and what that correlates to the staff, I think I can defer that to Rick. Maybe he knows. Or we can get that information for you.
Okay.
I don't think I have that exact breakdown in front of me.
Yep.
I'll get that to you, though.
Okay, thank you. And through the chair, just respectfully ask for that, that information. We have so many calls that come into our office, not because you are not doing your job, but just because they feel like they've made the initial call to OHS and they're waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. And I just would like to help you out as best as I can through this process. And so I'm happy to hear that there is additional staff capacity, but we are going through a housing crisis and displacement crisis. So we need all hands on deck.
Yeah, and I think we're up to like 5 or 6 contracts too, and sometimes, sometimes they're overwhelmed too, and so there's a little bit of a lag. But certainly, any case you get, to call us, and we'll move it.
Thank you. How am I doing on time, Chair?
Your time is up.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor.
Good morning, right? It's still morning? Yes. Good morning. So before I dive into some of my questions, I just wanted to acknowledge Danielle Johnson and her amazing team. I could send an email out at 11 o'clock at night on a Saturday, and I don't know how in the world you are actually even thinking of responding. But when we are in crisis and when we are responding to the needs of people, I don't think there's not one department here in the city of Boston that is so hands-on when it comes to delivering. And I just want to say thank you, Danielle, because there has not been one case that I have not brought to you that you and your team have not been as like everything is an emergency for you all, and you respond in the ways of meeting that moment. And I just want to say thank you for your hard work. Sheila, I mean, this is the department that we are in constant communication with. So I just want to say thank you, because I copy you on those emails and you're also just as equally as responsive. So I just want to say thank you, because this is what our constituents are in need of, and that is response. And so just want to say thank you. And I think that in terms of building your capacity, I want to echo my colleagues' comments in regards to, do you have enough in that budget? Because as the crisis continues to build, so will the need and the number of phone calls that we are getting. So I just want to make sure that you're setting your team up for success. And to that point, I know 311 handles a lot of the calls. Sometimes they get funneled over to you all. So I just want to make sure that in terms of coordination, you're really thinking about all of that. And if you want to ask for more, Danielle and Sheila, you know that you got me. I will be fighting for whatever additional supports you need.
Thank you.
In that line item.
Thank you.
So that all said, I want to just dive in a little bit into some things. I want to echo my colleagues' questions around the AMI and pushing for 40%. I want to go on the record on that, and just curious, want to we always talk about affordable housing, and this is one of the things that I've been asking for, and how do we define affordability, and affordable to who, and the middle class and the lower income brackets and all that good stuff. So, for me, and people know this, that growing up, I bounced from place to place, and it wasn't until I was in the 5th grade that I had my own room and that I didn't share space with other families. And that is still the case for a lot of our recent arrivals and immigrants that come to this country in terms of their housing situation. And that as a result of that, that also adds layers of trauma that I want to name for the record, that all of these things are interconnected, and also how our kids are showing up in school. And I'm curious to that, what and how are you interfacing with other city agencies to look at housing holistically and not just around placing people, but also thinking about the trauma and the mental health and wellness needs of our recent arrivals in particular?
It's a great question, and you're right. Housing is that's why we're in this field. It is at the root of everything, right? Health and mental health and school performance, and actually even increases in wages, right? Stable housing allows you to focus on, what you're making and where you're working. So I will say the days are kind of a blur just getting people housed, but I think there are a couple of, certainly bright spots. We're working very closely with the BPS and the BHA around making vouchers available and housing resources available for families that are housing insecure or that are currently homeless and living in shelter. So there's a lot of very good organized conversations there. We're working with the Public Health Commission as we really start working with homeless individuals and families that are leaving shelter, and homeless individuals that have gone through an awful lot, substance use disorders or mental health or loss of income, and working with BPS to make, Boston Public Health Commission, to make sure that they're also getting the mental health and the behavioral health and the substance use disorder services that they need. So there's a lot of good work going on. I think it's really anything that we're not doing is just because of lack of hours in the day. Yeah. But I think you're right to say that the connections need to be strong, and we need to be very, very thoughtful about them. Yeah. So they're very good work, and more work could be done.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Sheila. Let's talk a little bit about the Section 8 vouchers for BPS in particular, because we, last week, we were at the Sumner and we were working with some Latino parents on some other stuff, but a lot of issues have come up for parents who are living in shelter. And we also have been communicating with St. Stephen's. It's a parent organizing group that have brought to our attention some of the lack of, or at least having a hard time understanding how many vouchers do we have set aside for BPS families, and what is the communication channel to ensure that those families have access to them. Can you just help us understand what that little hiccup is all about?
Sure.
Because there seems to be a disconnect.
Joel.
Good morning, counselors. Joel Will, Chief of Staff at the Boston Housing Authority. In regards to the BPS vouchers, so we do provide both Section 8 and City of Boston vouchers. Thank you for that support to BPS families. That is, and people are currently being housed that way. I am not unfamiliar, Counselor, to the concern and to the complaint that you are raising. And in fact, I was, during the Louis Dubown, the Peace Walk, Mother's Day Walk for Peace, I was walking right next to one of my dear friends who's a former BTU organizer who was reiterating some of these items. What I wanted to say, so just to give you a sense of how this partnership works, it's between Boston Housing Authority, BPS, and a couple of different nonprofits. It's about several hundred vouchers in this pool, and
Several hundred? Not that I thought there were more than. Did you say several hundred?
Yeah, I can follow up with exact numbers on that. The general process here is that people do need to go through their school liaison. We understand that may be different, maybe a slightly different role at different schools in terms of do they have a family liaison or a homelessness liaison, but the initial intake would be on the school side. We're then working with Family Aid, a nonprofit in Boston, and that information passing through BPS and the nonprofit then comes to BHA. I do know that we have, I think, several hundred folks in the queue, in fact. And we can get you a better status update of sort of where, how many are pending and what's the additional voucher ability. Part of the increase in the city-funded voucher is to continue making referrals there, but I understand it's not just the question is not, and the concern is not just a supply of voucher affordability, it's what's the process and how do we get people in that. My brief response here is I think we need to talk a little bit more with BPS in terms of how do we make sure that information is disseminated, it is disseminated clearly, but also that we're not over-promising what we can commit on, because there is a limit of vouchers, but on the one hand, and on the other hand, the queue there is it's a much shorter wait list than our public housing wait list, right? One thing I also wanted to mention is that we do have a separate partnership on the public housing side with Higher Ground, a nonprofit here that works with homeless families in 7 BPS schools. So we are working on both ends of that to make sure that we can really end family homelessness and to ensure students aren't living in overcrowded conditions. I think it is an amazing success story each and every time, and I also think it's a work in progress on the communication channels.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I will say, I've been working with some families who are living in shelter right now. There's 2 particular families that have been in shelter now for over a year, who are BPS parents. And I think some of the concerns also is the language barrier and access to information. So I think that there's some more work that we could be doing there in terms of just making sure that information is reaching people in multiple languages, because there is something that's structurally difficult. And then I want to add one more. There is a family that we've been working with, and they're undocumented. And so through our advocacy, what we have learned is that if there's at least one person in the household that is a resident, a legal resident, that they can apply through that channel, even though the parent may be undocumented. So there's even information, because I always say information is cash. And so if you have it, you're going to be okay. And if you don't, you're going to be struggling to make your ends meet. So this was an additional layer of information that is not out in the community, that even though the parents are undocumented, if the child was born here, they are eligible to do that. So I just think that as we start thinking about communication, or at least that's what I heard. I don't know if that's true, but that's what I heard. Can you confirm, yes or no?
What I would say is that, so for both of our city-funded and our state-funded resources, right, so that's going to include municipal vouchers, state vouchers, and state public housing, we don't discriminate based on national origin or residency, nor do we prorate the rent, right? So that means for folks who have mixed status or may not have legal residency, we are still able to offer them housing as human beings.
No, but that's not the question. The question that that has bubbled up to the top is because BHA is a federal it's a federal program, that there is some discrepancy, or at least that's what communities who are undocumented are under the impression that they don't qualify.
For federal housing
Yeah,
programs, not
right.
for other programs. We are blessed to have support from multiple partners in administering resources, and so for federal Section 8 or federal public housing, unfortunately, the government,
Right.
Congress then had to have made that decision. But and again, that extends to if someone has a mixed status household in federal public housing, their rent is prorated. That's not the case in state programs, or in this case municipal. We don't feel the need to screen or discriminate against people based on that. And with the federal regulations, we don't have an option.
Okay, great. I hope the folks who are listening in know that, because this was a point of contention for a lot of families who are undocumented, that were unclear about what they can or cannot qualify for. And so there was somebody who was a housing specialist that came to meet with some of these families, and they said that you could still apply if it's a legal resident. So that was the loophole. So I just want to make sure that we're not providing misinformation to families.
And I should actually add that it is more nuanced, particularly given the current scenario. I don't claim to be I don't claim to be anything, but I'm certainly not an immigration attorney or humanitarian parole attorney. But what I would say is there are multiple legal statuses that do allow you to qualify for federal programs. And so in the current wave of folks coming to this country, some of them have statuses that do allow you to access federal resources. So it is complicated and it is hard to give out blanket information, but some of the folks, for example, if they're here on humanitarian parole, would be eligible to apply. And then the other complicating factor is our federal programs are the largest, and on the public housing side, it's a wait list, it's open, you can apply. Some of the other programs are targeted and have a more closed entry system, referral based. So it is important that information is distributed, and I think people need to know how to go to the right channels. So going back to the BPS program, and I want to actually thank, understanding the concerns that you raised and that I've heard recently, I want to thank Brian Marks and Kadon Harris and all the incredible BPS team for just, again, because every family that's been housed, it's like a life-changing experience.
It has been, yes.
For some of the programs that are not just open application like that, because you do need to go through some sort of school site employee, I think that we need to think about a way to distribute information that is fair and equitable, but also doesn't go beyond who is eligible to it or create confusion.
Yeah, thank you. And my time has been up, so I want to be respectful. Just because the chair's not here doesn't mean that we can run around here buck wild. So I'm going to stop with my questions, and I know that my council colleague, Councilor Lara, is up next. Thank you. I'll wait for my second round.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Fernanda Anderson, the chair of the committee, had to take a quick break, so it is my turn, so I'll ask my questions, and I'm going to make sure to time myself, too. So thank you all for all of your work. I mean, we have, as the housing chair on the city council, I have come into contact with most of you, and I think I want to echo what everybody is saying in terms of responsiveness, just being available. I couldn't ask for better partners when it comes to really housing the people of the city. I have a couple of questions. I'm going to start with one of the budget requests that we made. One of the things that we've seen, we had a hearing here on the Boston City Council, and it was specifically about housing for members of the LGBTQ community. And one of the things that we found was that we had multiple organizations all across the city who were providing housing for this population already, right? Either they had homes, rooms, and so on and so forth. And my hope was that we would be able to, in the budget, maybe create some kind of line item that would be a grant, right, a grant line item or an RFP that would go out that would allow these organizations, and they run the gamut. There were organizations that were providing housing for LGBTQ youth who were homeless. There were organizations that were providing housing for queer folks who were coming out of incarceration. There were organizations that were providing housing for LGBTQ seniors and so on and so forth, right? And so just all across the board really providing housing for members of this community that were really struggling. And one of the conversations that we had was particularly about ARPA funding being a possible use for that, right? That it's not included in the operating budget, and so that there's a possibility to use ARPA funding for that kind of grant making. So can you share a little bit about how much of ARPA funding is still in housing and how much of it could possibly be used for like a grant program for organizations that are, because we provide housing, right? We're building it, we're funding it, we're giving people money, but these organizations just need support for the housing that they're already providing. And so I think that, you know, it's going to take all of us, right? Like it's like an ecosystem of providing housing across the city. And so I'm curious about where you see an opportunity for that, how much ARPA money has already been spent, if there's any that is left that would particularly be useful for that kind of grant making.
Yeah, so I'm going to, just to it's complicated, right? So I'm looking at two staff members, one who is actually making funding available for LGBTQ youth, homeless youth. Lila, do you want to come down and talk a little bit about Bia's work? And then Jessica's been working with some of these organizations on actually owning property. So I don't know if you guys would mind coming down and just giving a quick, 30-second, because I don't want to chew into the council's time too much. While they come down, the question around is ARPA left for this resource? I'll hand it over to Rick. Maybe acquisitions or.
And you can also go to the podium. Like there's all the mics are on at the podium too. Yeah.
In terms of the ARPA funding, thanks to the city council and the mayor, $232 million was allocated out of ARPA funding, was allocated to housing. We have spent or encumbered $50 million of that so far. A large portion of the remainder of that is kind of reserved for. We have specific housing projects that we are planning to fund or expecting to fund out of that out of that revenue. So we would have to look at some of the line items, and I think work with the mayor's office and with the city council to kind of carve out if there was an interest in setting aside funding specifically for a program like what you're describing. We would just have to kind of, I think do that. It's not explicitly called out in the appropriation that was done last year, but it could certainly be done.
I guess I would add to that, the buckets are probably broad enough that if there was a project or two that we wanted to, put in one of those larger categories, we could.
And sorry, go ahead, please.
Well, just briefly, hi, I'm Lila Bernstein, Deputy Director for the Supportive Housing Division. In terms of youth and young adults experiencing homelessness, certainly LGBTQ youth are at much higher risk of experiencing homelessness. And there are lots of different partnerships that we've been part of and hoping to convene through our strategic plans to end homelessness for youth and young adults, one of which is fairly new around host homes, which is a model specifically for families or households that have an extra space where they can actually host a young person for up to 6 months. So we're funding a pilot with an organization called Bagley. I forget what Bagley stands for, Boston something.
Boston area gay, lesbian, youth.
Youth, yes, Bagley, and they're great. And so we're piloting this new model, but they're it's not the only intervention. It's not the only way to address safety for young people who are part of the LGBTQ community and experiencing homelessness.
Thank you. And I guess one of my questions particularly would be about what the process would be for making the decision. And so when I'm looking at the Mayor's Office of Housing, this is a priority, right? We had a hearing about it. So part of what we did in our office is that we ran this entire campaign last June where we heard from LGBTQ people all across the city about what were the issues that were most salient for their community. Mm-hmm. There were 6 issues that rose to the top. We filed 6 hearing orders, had a hearing on each of those issues. Housing is one of them. And so given what we've heard from our community members, that is something that I want to focus on. And what is the process to make that consideration with ARPA? Because, right, I don't want to make an amendment to the operating budget if the process for if the buckets are large enough and we can do it through ARPA and we can kind of collaborate on getting out an RFP or something of that sort, then I'm curious what you would suggest.
And I wasn't at that hearing, I don't know if staff were, but was it, I know we are doing, the Pride certainly in Hyde Park and, certainly going to test that as hopefully a good model for our senior populations. But were there things that you heard, Councillor, that is more like needing rent assistance, or was it more like bricks and mortar, we need development where folks can live together, or?
Yeah. So folks are experiencing an incredible amount of discrimination. Mm-hmm. So for being at multiple intersections, both that they're either previously incarcerated and also queer, or being a young person and also queer, or being trans and being discriminated. So it's more about that, even if there is housing, that when we talk about marginalized communities, there are people who are furthest out in the margins, and that those people are experiencing a level of discrimination that makes it untenable for them without support without support. And we see a lot of people who are going to the office and trying to fight that discrimination. But there are organizations who are providing housing that is safe, that is targeted for queer folks, that is safe for them. They own multiple homes where they house people, or there's an organization like Break Time, right? Yeah. That they have very specific, this is how much it cost us for a bed for a young person, or, the Pride, they came to testify as well. The Trans Emergency Fund, where it won't necessarily be capital funding to purchase housing, but funding to support the organization that is already providing housing that is targeted specifically for LGBTQ people. Okay. And so it doesn't have to be a level of capital investment, although I'm sure that if these organizations become sustainable, right? Because one of the issues, and I come from philanthropy before I became an elected official, is that, for a decade, we have been beating the drum to philanthropic organizations that organizations need general operating support. Mm-hmm. That you can't just give people programmatic money, they can't do anything with that. And so what we find is that these organizations are getting a lot of programmatic support, not getting any general operating funds, and then they're completely unable to scale or to grow. And so what I'm looking for is, we have nonprofit organizations that are taking it upon themselves to serve a population where, that we are not, for lack of capacity or lack of, not for lack of not wanting to, but that we are not necessarily serving, and how can the city support them in bringing their work to scale?
Right. So I might correct what I said earlier then. Some of the ARPA buckets are more around development or rental assistance or emergency housing, those kind of like pretty obvious, categories when it comes to housing and housing crisis. We don't, and I'm going to look at Rick for a minute. I don't think that we've got any categories that are general operating support for nonprofits, or that, so that is probably something that we would have to find a new resource for. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we can talk to our partners at City Hall and see if they feel like we have authority within our existing buckets to carve out specific funding. I also don't know if the city has additional ARPA funding that hasn't yet been allocated, so we can also discuss that with them as well. But yeah, I think all of the funding that we got, as you're describing, like support for nonprofits, were for specific nonprofits.
Yes.
And in addition to that, there was, like Sheila said, pretty clear buckets around affordable housing development or permanent supportive housing development or acquisition. So, but I think we can have the conversation and then and report back and work with your office on how to move forward.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, I would love to have that conversation more. And, and it might not be at MOH, it might be at the Office of LGBTQ Advancement, or it might be, right? So I think positioning wise where it goes, I would, we can have a conversation. I would leave that up to y'all, but I think that there should be something of the sort, because there are people who are already providing housing, right? And so how do we support them to help them help us?
Yes. Yeah. And grow their efforts.
And grow. Yeah. So my time is up. Thank you also. The chair is not here. Councilor Braden, do you have?
All right. I didn't think I would still be here. Let's see. Elders, BHA. Is Joel back? Joel, the question about Patricia White?
Yes.
It's okay. I know it's been in process for a while. And
yeah. Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, I seem to be stepping out to get information on the queries and then missing the next one. My apologies. So, really incredible project and community at Patricia White Apartments. And as you know, and as you mentioned, our projects do take some time. I believe, so that project is in design, and we're actually doing some updates to the design based on the recent direction to go fossil free. I think we have a really incredible opportunity there to do not just an improvement, but a transformative sustainability project along with the other upgrades. In terms of the timeline, I think we are looking at later in 2024 for the actual construction start. That just involves finishing the design, finalizing the financing piece from our partners, and then the beautiful event with the shovels and the dirt. So I think that's what we're looking at. We will have continued, I think, community engagement and, again, finalized design between now and then. That's the short of it. Councillor.
Very good. Thank you. I think the other issue was really thinking about the turnaround with the IDP units, Sheila. Marketing them initially when they first come online is working, I think. And then when those units become vacant, I've heard that sometimes the turnaround, they remain vacant for some time. That's maybe longer than the need be, so that we have a housing stock where, if this was a commercial property, they'd be turning around in a couple of months, and we're waiting for 6 months or maybe a year to get people back into an IDP unit. So can you give me an update on where we are with that?
I can, and I will say great improvements have been made, and it's certainly still an ongoing process. But the mayor is very interested in this topic as well. So I can say that we have caught up on all of our marketing plans and lotteries. We added staff to the Mayor's Office of Housing, and so feel very good about that. Right now, after there's a lottery, then people that are buying or renting a home, their files go to the BPDA, and then the BPDA starts doing income certifications. So it can be sort of a process with lots of pieces and lots of people. Right now, the BPDA, Mayor's Office of Housing, and others are mapping out the process and really looking at what's really necessary to ensure that we're abiding by fair housing law and that we're doing everything we should about making these opportunities well known throughout the city. And at the same time, though, having expectations around how long things should take. So we're doing a lot of mapping, and we're starting working with Moya, Modem, sorry, not Moya, Modem, to really understand the user experience as well, because folks are saying that if you need a rental unit and then you're being offered one 4 months later and you had to go through multiple hoops, it was not a good experience. So we really want to understand the user experience. So all of that work is being done, and we have to report back to the mayor very soon on that work. So more to come on that, but I can say a lot of the projects that didn't have legal issues, or I know we've been working on a few that have had more complicated issues, but the projects that have not had great issue have been caught up.
Very good. And thank you for working with our office on, the one on ComAv where they was released to universities and had IDP units that were...
You've had several.
I've had several, yeah, keep you busy. The other question is a plug actually for the home ownership. I had at our coffee in Brighton yesterday, we had a young woman came to me and said that she had been in the home ownership, IDP home ownership program, and she'd lived in an IDP unit for 4 years, I think 4 or 5 years with her family. She's a parent in the neighborhood. Her kids go to one of the local schools, and their experience of having that opportunity allowed them to put some money away and save, because they had some stable housing costs, save some money, and now they're buying a home in the neighborhood, which is sort of, and now that unit becomes available for somebody else to hopefully do the same thing.
It's the perfect story.
Yeah, so it's good news, and we just want more of our families to be able to do that and become long-term residents and not be displaced out of the city. We need those families to stay.
And we have seen quite a number of people buying affordable units in Alston and Brighton, and I think it's because the community, and you've participated in a lot of those conversations and working with developers to make their IDP contribution be homes that people can buy at decent prices. So we are seeing, you may have seen one of the slides where a lot of the down payment assistance we're giving are people buying homes, allowing people with even lower incomes than 80% AMI to actually acquire. So we've had some good successes in Alston Brighton. Yeah. So thank you.
And even though you get quite a small amount of equity in your IDP unit but it is something. And the difference, they've been able to save some to put some money away to, so it's really heartening to see that work, and we'd just like to see more of it work.
Absolutely.
For more people all across the city. Yeah, thank you. Madam Chair, who's chairing? Madam Chair. Thank you, that's all I have.
Councillor Mejia, you now have the floor.
Thank you. All right, we're almost done. And I don't have a lot of controversial questions. You guys are one of my favorites, so I reserve the heat for others. I'm just curious, we've been getting a lot of calls from elders on a number of different fronts, and I'm just going to kind of give you a few things that we've been hearing from some of our elders who are on fixed incomes, but do not meet the income guidelines to be able to get supports. Because their fixed income might be a little bit higher. So they don't qualify for some housing, supports. So I'm just curious kind of how and what we can be doing to kind of, wrestle with that.
Yeah. Because the vast majority of seniors that have housing issues are on very fixed income, usually social SSI or SSDI. So, but seniors that have, especially government employees.
Yeah,
That,
exactly.
I mean, that's, I think that may be who you're referring to,
That's
or
right.
they have pensions.
That's
The
right.
pensions are not fat pensions by any means, but has put them over the income guidelines. I think it's a very, very good point. Most of the senior projects that that we're working on do have a range of incomes, the majority being very available, those units being available for very low income populations. But I would love if you have examples, not right now, but later, so we could start really thinking as we design new affordable homeowner, senior complexes, that we're being aware that we have to set some of those units aside.
Yeah, I don't want to just focus on development. I want to focus on, it's and, right? So it's not just around developing senior affordable housing. I want to talk about some of the seniors who own their own homes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
And want to
Yeah.
stay there, but are having a hard time with their property taxes. So I kind of want to like bring them into the conversation because they are still very much part of our communities, but they are feeling the crunch.
Absolutely, and you're right, utility bills are gone up, taxes are gone up, repairs have gone up. So those seniors should be using our repair programs, though. They really should, because they probably don't have a large nest egg. We all have filed the transfer fee home rule petition, and within that, it provides much greater tax relief for our senior populations. It widens who's eligible, and it doubles the relief that they can receive. So we need to get that passed for so many reasons. Without state legislation, we can't reduce their tax burden. And then on utilities, they should be looking to winterize and get more efficient, heating systems, et cetera. So a lot of these seniors don't have mortgages, but they do have very, very high carry costs. So
And
there's no
property taxes.
Yeah, there's not one easy answer, but property taxes is what I hear the most, is seniors cannot, and oftentimes they sell their homes and they don't want to because they can't afford. So we really have to have the legislature give us the tools that we need to reduce their housing, their tax burden.
So I'm going to stay on for seniors for a little bit longer. I'm also curious, there are a lot of seniors who are being taken advantage of. There's one in particular case right now of a senior who had some contract work that went wrong. And so I'm just curious what supports maybe Age Strong and your department are able to be able to better support our seniors who are being targeted.
Right. Seniors that need home repair or that are going to enter into any kind of contract should call our homeowner services, and Karen was just down here. The programs are rich. We've got, we can help arrange good contractors to do the work. We can help fund the work. And then we have very talented housing specialists that can really oversee the construction. So, and just give good advice, right? So even if seniors don't want to partake in our programs, if seniors are calling and saying, what should I do and how do I approach this, we'll be glad to provide very, very good advice. But it's a good-sized apartment, there's resources there, and they should really make themselves available. There's also, we work with a stable of nonprofits, good nonprofits, to do small repairs. I need grab bars. I need a new banister. I can't get my air conditioner out of my house. I've got a small leak. My tile has become loose. Those small repairs that people can be taken advantage of, we also have like programs for those smaller repairs as well.
Okay, so my time, I know, is going to be limited. I'm going to ask one more question. And this is really, I'm going to be focusing on returning citizens and our young people, 19 to 24-year-olds, that age bracket. You're not living with your parents, but maybe you're transitioning out of DYS or you're transitioning out of foster care. I'm curious in terms of housing supports for populations that are non-traditional, right? And this is where I feel becomes the hardest, is because if you are a young adult, that you have no family ties, what more can we be doing to support?
Sure. And if it's okay, I mean, I'm going to ask Lila to come down again because we have been able to reduce the percentages of young adults that are homeless or unstably housed. The numbers have been pretty, just by putting resources and working very, very intently with our good nonprofits. Just give an overview of.
Hi, Councillor. Thank you for your question. So when we look at the data from, I think it was 2019, we counted the number of youth and young adults experiencing literal homelessness, so living in shelters or on the street. And after this 3-year strategic plan, the data from last year, there was a 45% reduction. So we're making progress. So the reason I say that is we're making progress, but it doesn't mean that we've finished the job. There's still youth and young adults in our city who are experiencing homelessness. And particularly the population you're mentioning is an incredibly vulnerable population who not only are experiencing housing instability or homelessness, but also have other barriers to stability in housing. The primary intervention that we've funded for youth and young adults is on the housing side is rapid rehousing. So it's up to 2 years of rental assistance plus some stabilization support. But I think what we've learned through this work is that it's not just about housing, it's about housing and opportunity. And I think there's more work we need to do to partner across sectors to really make sure that when we are intervening with housing, we're also intervening with opportunity so that young people have the future that they're trying to build. And that looks like a lot of different things depending on the young people. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but I'm giving a little bit of
Yes, you are, and I'm really happy to see the investments and, you know, some of the outcomes. I just would like to just note for the record is that when I think about 19 to 24-year-olds, we have to think about them holistically. Mm-hmm. So it's about workforce development, it's about housing, it's about looking at the entire need and then being able to support and fund services on both ends, because I think that that is really what's going to get us to where we need to be in terms of stability. So I think this is a question for both housing and also workforce development and the intersection of these two for this particular age group. Thank you. And I heard my buzzer, and I really do appreciate all your hard work. Thank you.
Who turned off my light? Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Councilor Lara, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so my next question is about particularly the Fair Housing Commission. A goal of the Fair Housing Commission is to increase access to housing opportunity through enforcement. And we had 158 intakes that were processed in FY23, and the target number of intakes for FY24 is 400. So is there what funding can be contributed to the increase in intakes that you're hoping to process?
Well, thank you for the question. Oh, sorry. There we go. Thank you for the question. One of the things I realized when I came in as director was that the commission was administratively top-heavy. Mm-hmm. So in my budget request, I wanted to switch out 2 positions, and the result of all the moving of staff around was to create 4 senior staff positions, and to take our administrative assistant position, the person who would normally work at our front desk, but because we don't get a lot of walk-ins, most of the communication by phone and by email, I said, well, I want to cross-train that person to also do intakes. So with a staff of 5 doing intakes, we figured we could do more intakes in the course of the next fiscal year. Now, when we say intakes, we get calls, all manner of calls, much like city councilors do. And we have to discern which calls, which situations are actually fair housing issues. Oftentimes, we refer them to Office of Stabilization or other city or state agencies, or sometimes recommend that they may have a cause of action in housing court. because they're not necessarily fair housing issues. But when they are, those are the intakes that have then become fair housing complaints that we investigate. So it sounds like a lot, but we have to sift through all of that every day to get to the real kernel of the fair housing issues that are present.
So the increased amount of intake is based on the restructure of the staffing and how much you're expecting to be able to do now that you've restructured the office? Okay, thank you so much. And what is the budget for the acquisition opportunity program in FY? And is that all from ARPA, all of the AOP money that's in the budget?
Do you have that right? AOP.
Sorry.
The budget of
apologize.
AOP.
The budget of AOP, yeah, for FY, so we have $48 million in ARPA funding that was allocated for AOP. I think we've spent, I just had that up here for a second. Where'd it go? Yeah, we've already spent 12 of that, so we have $28 million, and that's as of right now, that's the source that we're using for AOP for FY24.
So in FY24, there are $28 million on the budget for AOP. It's all ARPA money. Is there
Yes.
any plan for sustainability after the ARPA
After
money is
ARPA?
spent? Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
thank you.
We really need the transfer fee to pass. It's the game changer. It's our ongoing ARPA.
We have people that are sponsoring it at the State House. Why isn't it moving? Okay.
No, well, I mean, I think there is, it just got filed in fairness. There hasn't been a hearing yet.
It got filed for the second time.
Filed for the second time. But there's a lot of good conversations going on. I think there's momentum, and we're just, we all need to work together to get it passed.
Thank you. I really appreciate that answer. So when we talk about new construction for FY24, how much is the budget for new construction that you have at MOH, and how much from the city's operating budget, and how much is, so do you have, based on your entire construction budget, do you have a breakdown of how much is from city, state, linkage fees, and so on and so forth?
I don't know that I could provide a totally comprehensive answer to that.
I will accept it as, I can make a request through the
Yeah.
chair to
yes,
accept
we
it
can
and
get
follow as
that for you
follows.
easily.
Yeah.
And
As opposed to me trying to piece it together, that would be better.
Okay, I do have, a lot of the questions that I have are really specific.
Yep.
So I think that there are some more, that are more numbers that I can send you through the chair. My next question is the budget. In the budget, we have a goal of 540 low-income housing units in FY23. And as you know, we've been doing a lot of work with the Housing Committee to really change the inclusionary development policy. We also have 540 units that is our goal in FY24. That includes deed restricted and IDP units. So can you tell me how now that we're going through the IDP process and kind of trying to fix the policy, what are we defining as affordable for these 540 units?
Right. So our goal next year is 1,000 deed restricted units. So
FY24 is 1,000?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And you're right, some of that will be inclusionary development, and then a lot of that will be units that we're funding through construction and AOP. So if I had to predict, most of the IDP units that will pull permits next year will be developments that are under the existing policy.
Okay.
Right? Because it takes,
They've already been-
it takes a while, right? Probably if we pass IDP, the new changes would they would go into effect on January 2024. So I think probably the units that we'll see this year will be.
So we're looking that only the units that are approved in the second half of FY24 will
I think
have
that's right.
the impact of the new inclusionary
I think
development
that's right,
policy.
yes.
And so right now, we are still, with the units that are being approved between now and then, we are still defining affordability as 70-80% of the AMI.
That's right, 13 at 70 unless it's off-site, correct.
And
Correct.
13%.
13%
Got
at
it.
70. That is correct.
All right, thank you so much. I have other questions.
But
I'm gonna send
I
them.
will, just to answer not to answer your question, but to tell you that we will answer your question, we will get you a breakdown of what we anticipate the pipeline to be in associated AMIs.
Can you also give me a breakdown of what we did
Sure.
this previous
Of
year?
course.
So from the units that we did fund in FY23, how much of it,
Of course.
what percentage they were, just so
Yes.
I can kind of.
Be glad to.
All right, thank you so much, Chief. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor. I asked similar questions earlier, so I'm sure.
Sorry for.
No, I'm sure the chief will
Yes,
provide.
we'll get you that.
But you really presented it nice and clear. We're going to go to public testimony. Did we have any questions for Jeff with BPDA in terms of community processes, in terms of mitigation funds? If we have no questions, we didn't want to keep you. After public testimony, we'll go, but you're welcome to remain, and a question might pop up. For public testimony, those in person, I have Meijan Huang. Ms. Huang, if you can speak into the microphone, introduce yourself for the record, and name, affiliation, or residence, if you'd like to share.
Hello， 大家好，我叫黃美群，我而家住響抄灘，之前住響唐人街。
Hello everyone, my name is Wang Mei Kwan. Mi Quan Huang? Mei Chun Huang. I currently live in Charlestown. Before that, I used to live in Chinatown.
Hi, Ms. Mijing.
Hi. 我支持波士頓增加可負擔性房屋嘅撥款。我記得我一嚟到波士頓咧，又住響唐人街2號 Johnny Court 嗰度。我啲屋企人已經喺嗰度住咗30幾年。後來就係我同我老公啦，同埋我3個細路仔住喺嗰度嘅。
Hi, I'm here to let you know that I support the City of Boston increased affordable housing. I remember when I first came to Boston, I lived in Chinatown, 2nd Johnny Court. Me and my family lived there for 30 years, and then my husband and me and my 3 kids lived there.
喺2014年，房東就話要賣嗰間屋啦，問我哋買唔買，但係我哋根本冇咁多錢嚟買。喺嗰陣時咧，我唔知道有土地信託啦。喺2014年嘅12月，喺新業主咧就一買咗屋就立即加租，用盡各種方法逼我哋搬走啦，包括有恐嚇啊、威脅啊等等。
In 2014, the homeowner said that he needed to sell the house and asked us if we want to buy the house. We don't have that much money to buy that house. So, and at that time, we didn't know about the community land trust program. So, and in 2014, December, a new owner purchased that property. And they have so many ways want to force us out, including intimidation and try to threaten us.
咁我哋就尋求華人前進會幫忙啦。喺2017年上咗庭之後咧，我哋就搬走咗。咁我哋嗰棟樓嗰啲長期住客咧都被逼走啦。咁喺呢幾年咧，有好多排屋都好似我哋咁樣被逼遷。如果土地信託有嚟自波士頓政府更多嘅支持咧，即係俾更多嘅錢喺土地信託買更多嘅排屋，就可以保護我哋好多家庭免於逼遷。
So then we seek help from Chinese Progressive Association, CPA. In 2017, after the court, we move out. The whole time we live there, we feel like they've been forced us out, and in all these years, it's a lot of people living in rural houses have experiences like us, they were being forced to move out. And think about this, if we have the community land trust and more people in the city can get help, and then there will be more funding to build affordable housing, more family like us can be protected from situation like that.
對於我哋今日有好多居民都一齊嚟，但係而家比較耐，所以佢哋走去食 lunch。我哋唐人街咧不管係我哋賴以生存嘅家園啦，亦都係我哋精神文化嘅根據地，所以我哋希望有可以建更多嘅可負擔性房屋，同埋迫切需要保護我哋而家嗰啲排屋啦，保護而家住喺嗰度嘅移民工薪階層嘅家庭。
A lot of us are here today, but not many here sitting because it's lunchtime, so they went out to get lunch. We are a lot of residents here today to let you know that Chinatown is not just our home, a place to live, but it is our cultural root for us. It is very important. It is our culture and it is our root. So we hope that you can help to build more affordable housing and more funding for the community land trust to help people like us and who need housing and people who are experiencing situation like in the row houses have to force to move out, and help us with the working class immigrant families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mujing. George Lee. Thank you. If you can tell her that we appreciate her advocacy and for being here and waiting through lunchtime. Miss Interpreter, sorry, I didn't catch your name. Anna? Anna, if you can tell Ms. Mejing that we appreciate her advocacy and for remaining here during lunchtime and being able to sacrifice her lunch to make such important points. Thank you so much. Mr. Lee, is that a presentation?
So I have two testimonies from people who couldn't be here because of school and appointments.
George doesn't laugh. George,
huh?
Is that a presentation?
It's just charts with some numbers, but it's not a whole presentation.
How can we see it?
I'll hold it up in a second.
Okay,
it's just a few key
okay.
numbers.
You'll help. Okay, Councilman here will assist.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman.
I'm going to read the other two testimonies first, though. So
sure.
Those don't involve the charts.
Whenever you're ready.
Does the sound come through okay? I always forget if I have to hunch
Sorry?
down. Does the sound come through okay?
A little louder would be great.
Okay. How about now?
Can you lift the mic and get closer?
Hello, hello.
Okay.
All right, first testimony. Hi, my name is Carlise. I live in District 7. As a young woman living in Boston, I find it ridiculous how the housing crisis is right now and how it's been for a while. I moved here 6 years ago when I was 9 years old, and shortly my family became homeless. My situation was horrible. My family was placed in a small motel with 2 beds, a mini fridge, and a microwave. It took us months to get an apartment, and that apartment was a small apartment with 2 small bedrooms that the 6 people in my household had to share. After this apartment, my mother was lucky enough to win a housing lottery with 3 bedrooms. Now there are 7 people living in my apartment, and we are barely getting by with the ridiculous rent, the maintenance issues, the lack of space, and other problems with our apartment. I demand that Mayor Wu and the city councilors add $10 million to the mayor's proposed housing budget for building new senior and family housing that is genuinely affordable, spacious, and comfortable for residents to live in. We shouldn't have houseless people, period. Second testimony. Hi, my name is Khalil. I'm a resident of Roxbury and a lead organizer with the Youth Justice and Power Union. I demand that Mayor Wu and the city councilors add $10 million to the mayor's proposed housing budget for building new senior and family housing that's truly affordable. Truly affordable housing means housing that is affordable to what most BIPOC renters make, which is 30% AMI. That means including project-based vouchers with at least 50% of the units. Some of the $10 million should be used for community visioning so that residents can decide what they need to go with the new housing. It's so important that affordable housing gets the money it needs. The city should be prioritizing community care. Families of color are continuously being pushed out of their neighborhoods. I know firsthand. As a teenager, my family was unable to afford our home and had to jump from shelter to shelter, split apart, and stay at different family members' houses or sleep in our car. It was such a traumatic experience to not have a comfortable place to rest my head at night. This is not about what makes the city the most money. This is not about politics. This is about holding space for people going through tough times. If you want to make this city a better place, a more peaceful place, you will fight to build new truly affordable housing, which means at least having 50% of units at 30% AMI. Thank you. So now I'll go to my testimony. My name is George Lee. I'm also an organizer with Youth Justice and Power Union. Thank you to the chair, Councilor Fernandez-Anderson. Thank you, Councilor Lara, and the folks who were here before, Councilor Mejia here, and Councilors Braden and Coletta. I want to share some basic information. This is from a report that the Mayor's Office of Housing worked with us on when looking at the IDP. This is median household income by race and ethnicity broken down by renters and owners. And I appreciate Chief Dillon pointing out before the understanding that even the 60% AMI units that a lot of low-income housing tax credit financing provides is too expensive sometimes. One of the testimonies was from someone who's in one of those units at 60% AMI, and it's still too expensive. So if you look on the right side, Asian Pacific Islander, Black, and Latinx, there's 2 bars for each. One represents renters and one for owners. And the folks who are going to be first-time homeowners or need affordable rental apartments are this lower bar. So the median income for Asian Pacific Islanders is $36,551. For Black families and individuals, it's $32,728. For Latinx, $31,296. So all in the 30,000s range. This is from census data, again, processed by the BPDA and the Mayor's Office of Housing from the city itself.
So, sorry, were you giving the average income for that? Okay.
Yep, the typical income for BIPOC renters who need affordable housing.
Can you say that one more time and slower for everybody at home?
Sure. So the 3 stats here, Asian and Pacific Islander households that rent in Boston make $36,551 a year. Black renters make $32,728, and Latinx renters make $31,296.
Thank you.
This is also a chart from the same report from the city and the Mayor's Office of Housing that shows who's the most rent burdened. And out of the renters who pay more than 30 or 50% of their income on housing, most of them are making less than 30% AMI. So you can see there's actually 43,477 households at that income level. And the numbers go down as you go higher in income because that's where the most need is. So when we're talking about who needs the most housing and who should be building for, we need a lot more at the lower AMIs. And I know Chief Dillon was talking before about trying to find that mix, but right now the mix is skewed too high. I think there's only 3% of new housing is being built at that level, so we really need to get that down, both in the IDP and in the city budget. And then one final chart. So most of the CDCs use what's called federal low-income housing tax credits, which is at 60% AMI. For a family of 4, that's $84,100. The new IDP proposal that the mayor put out does have an option for developers to do an average of 50% AMI. That would be $70,100 for a family of 4. As you can tell, those are both more than double the numbers that you just saw for the typical incomes for BIPOC renters. So there's 2 solutions that we're proposing. One is in the actual budget to add $10 million on top of the mayor's proposal. I think if I saw right on the slides before, it said maybe $8 million was in the operating budget for new construction, and then maybe another $9 million for supportive housing and homelessness. So understanding that there is ARPA money and federal money, but really need more city operating money to go into housing. And that could be for housing that's senior housing or family housing, making sure half the units are at least 2 bedrooms or up, and making sure that half of those units have project-based vouchers. Joel was presenting a little bit of information on the city Boston voucher program. It's being underutilized, but if we could encourage nonprofits to use them for more of their units and attach money to encourage them to apply for this 10 million, but also use those vouchers. And then also making IDP affordable at 40% AMI for rentals, not just the 50 and 60 AMI, and 50 to 100% AMI for ownership. Thank you. So those are the proposed solutions. Just to give a little more context, as you all know, there's been a lot of us who've been coming to the hearings advocating also for mental health crisis response, $40 million for participatory budgeting, $6 million for youth jobs, $40 million for participatory budgeting, and knowing that the police budget is going up by $10 million, which coincidentally is the amount of money we're asking for the housing increase to be. So really needing to prioritize community needs and not the police budget increase. Some questions I have for the Mayor's Office of Housing, knowing sometimes we're not allowed to ask directly, but just passing them on to the council if you feel it's appropriate to ask, is would the mayor consider including a 40% AMI option in the new IDP to reach those lower incomes that we just referenced? And if there's concerns around how to do that, will you work with us to find creative solutions? For example, one solution we've proposed is attaching those city vouchers, having developers use those city vouchers for that 50% AMI IDP, and then that actually gets down to 40% AMI. Also, would the mayor consider building in some more increases over time? I believe Chief Dillon said the new IDP will kick in January 1st, 2024. So if that goes up to 15 or 17%, would the mayor consider in 2025 kicking in another automatic 1 or 2%, like every year going up some percentage points? I'm going to quote from RKG's report. They're the consultant that the city hired, which is creating a plan that increases requirement over a set period, can add a level of predictability for both developers and property owners, and allow the market to absorb and plan for future changes along the way. That was in their recommendation when they said you could phase in higher requirements. So again, the two questions are, would the mayor consider including a 40% AMI option in the IDP, or figuring out any solutions if there's some worries about that, like using city vouchers? And number two, would the mayor consider increasing the IDP over time after January 1st, 2024? Thank you.
Thank you, George. It sounds like, Chief, George has answered half of the questions we sent to you. So thank you so much for that research and aggregating that data and making it visual for us. I would love a copy of whatever you have in digital form. Just for clarification, George, what would the 10 million do exactly for housing?
So right now, we're trying to figure out if it's 8 million or another 9 million. It's already in the city budget for building new housing. So the 10 million would be for MOH to give to groups and nonprofits to build 100% affordable housing, but making sure that at least half of those units have vouchers attached to them so that lower income families can actually afford to live there, and the folks who are most at risk of displacement can afford it instead of these 60% AMI units. I think right now the MOH policy might be 10, I think Chief Dillon was saying before, 10% set aside, but sometimes developers go beyond that. But with this 10 million, making sure half the units have vouchers, as well as making sure it's either senior housing or half of the units are family housing, 2 units, 2 bedrooms or up. And part of it is because residents need more than just housing. They might need jobs or services, childcare. What do they want in terms of open space or community space? That part of that 10 million would be to support community visioning as these new projects get built, to figure out what in addition to the housing that they would want built along with the housing.
To supplement some of that holistic ecosystem that Councilman Mejia alluded to.
Exactly.
Thank you. Chief, I think I don't need you to answer specifically the questions that George was asking, but what could 10 million do in this market?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of our development we also, we make sure the development is carrying private debt. We make sure that we're going to the state for resources. We're going to philanthropy. So, we would take, any amount of money that we receive through the construction of new affordable housing, and then try to, leverage it 2, 3, 4, 5-fold. So it would help us create new units of affordable housing, and we've been very, very fortunate lately that we're getting a lot of state resources too for our projects. They're well designed, they're well thought through. The communities are supportive, as you know. So it would just allow us to create more affordable housing. I think what Mr. Lee is saying, and I think we share that we do really need to be more intentional about our new construction having more units available for our lowest income families and seniors and individuals. That's what I sort of started by saying, and I do agree with him. So it would either increase the number of units, or it would allow us, by putting additional subsidy in, for us to have more units set aside for lower income populations.
Thank you. Okay. We have some folks online for public testimony. Is Meany still with us? Thank you. Councilor, did you want to give a closing statement? I know you have to go.
No, I just wanted to thank you all. I have a list of questions that I will send through the chair that are similar to the AOP funding, just a little bit more detailed, but I really appreciate all the time and all your hard work. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Hi, Meany.
Hi, Councilor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi, everyone. My name is Minnie McMahon. I'm a resident of Dorchester and am here representing the Greater Boston Community Land Trust Network. Today, we ask the Council for continued and robust investment in housing and neighborhood stabilization in 3 ways. Please provide annual budgetary support for community land trusts. Thank you for providing in 2021 through the budget and with the vision of the Council $2 million to community land trusts. That leadership catalyzed the creation of a CLT fund. Today, we ask that you make this an annual commitment in order to scale the impact of CLTs and support emerging CLTs across Boston's varied neighborhoods. Community land trusts fight displacement, stabilize families, and are working to make their neighborhoods climate resilient and economically equitable. So please make Boston a national leader in CLT and neighborhood stabilization by allocating $2 million annually to community land trusts. Secondly, please, thank you for the sustained funding in the Mayor's Office of Housing's budget for the Acquisition Opportunity Program. The real increase in support for that program during COVID has been hugely significant, and we support, thank you so much, Chief Dillon, you're raising, trying to maintain that rate of $28 million a year in fiscal year 24 and beyond. To reverse our housing crisis, we must protect and preserve existing housing for our city's residents, and that's what AOP helps accomplish. In addition to lobbying the state for the real estate transfer fee, which Chief Dillon spoke about, we asked city leaders to lobby too for the Small Properties State Acquisition Fund. This was passed by the legislature in 2021, and it's modeled after AOP. It's a new state program that is essentially trying to do at the state level what you all are accomplishing at the City of Boston. Lastly, please provide funds to support community-led planning. Community groups, including and certainly not limited to community land trusts, play a big role in planning in Boston without funding for this work. So as BPDA looks to dispose of land for the public good and is willing to work with community groups, please provide operating and program support for both the long-term site planning and for shorter-term site activations. So I'll just close by saying, while the COVID-19, the height of the crisis has passed for many of us, let's continue to commit to systems changing investments in our city and not return to business as usual. We do want to acknowledge the support for CLTs, certainly from members of the council and from Chief Dillon and your staff at Mayor's Office of Housing. Many thanks for your leadership, and let's please keep this type of investment going. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McMahon. Next, we have Lori Radwin.
Hello, am I on?
Yes, you are. Hi, Lori.
Hey, hi, Counselor. Thank you very much. My testimony actually is for the BPDA, and I didn't hear from the BPDA on the panel. Should I wait until the next panel presentation?
Or do both. It's up to you.
Why don't I wait when someone from the BPDA is present, if that's okay? That'll be this afternoon, correct?
No, I think, so someone from the BPDA is here and ready to answer questions. If your testimony is pertaining to specifics on presentation from BPDA, you should wait for that hearing.
Okay, well, yeah, why don't I wait for the hearing? But I got kind of jealous of Mr. Lee talking about other lines in the budget, and I had put in a question, and maybe for tomorrow's hearing. Is it the case that there's $17 million in the budget for bike lanes? And I can wait for that answer, but I got a little, like I said, jealous that we were talking about other lines in the budget as well. But I will wait till this afternoon, till after the BPDA presentation, and I thank you for your consideration.
Ms. Lori, as always, it's a pleasure to hear from you. Not sure which 17 million you speak of in terms of BPDA. We don't have a budget for BPDA.
No, I'm sorry. I spoke too quickly. It's the Boston Transportation Department, and they will be testifying tomorrow.
Okay.
And they're the ones, I think, they have 17 million in a line for bike lanes. And I put the question to your office, and I can wait for a response till that hearing.
Okay, sounds good. I'm happy to ask that question for you and look forward to your testimony tomorrow.
Thank you very much, and I'll see you this afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lori.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Next, we have Magalis Troncoso Lama. Is that okay? All right. Ms. Troncoso Lama, sorry it took us a while to get to you. Look forward to next one. Meredith Levy.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Meredith Levy, and I'm with the Boston Neighborhood Community Land Trust, where I serve as the executive director. And first, I want to thank you all to the council for all of your leadership in navigating probably the most significant crisis that we face in this generation, which is affordable housing. And I think you've been really resourceful in coming up with a lot of really great strategies. And thanks for the Mayor's Office of Housing and their support for this too. I'm writing on behalf of Boston Neighborhood Community Land Trust to encourage the Boston City Council to support specific funding for housing strategies to keep our low-income BIPOC residents in Boston and prevent them from getting displaced, especially in the neighborhoods that we serve in Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury. So specifically, I want to support what Minnie McMahon said on behalf of our land trust network. And I also want to just add my own comments. The first one, BNCLT strongly encourages the City Council to sustain and grow the Acquisition and Opportunity Program. We're happy to see the current support. We would always love increased funding. And this program would allow MOH to fund more acquisitions of properties at risk of displacement. And also, we hope to increase the per unit allocation for acquisitions to keep up with the growing market pressures. In the last 2 years, BNCLT, our organization, has been able to keep 15 low-income families from getting displaced in Dorchester through the purchase of 4 buildings. And all of this we would not be able to do. We wouldn't have been able to purchase it without the AOP funding. It is an highly effective program that focuses on housing preservation, which is critical to the stability of our densely built out neighborhoods in Boston. The second one, I also want to support, I'm glad to hear support for the city project-based voucher program. That is something that I think has also been an incredibly resourceful and flexible tool. It's very hard to get project-based vouchers, and it's especially hard to get them for the scattered site properties that we are acquiring through preservation. This program has enabled us to do that. We were able to also make use of a number of vouchers this past year. And what that does for the community, for us, but for our partners throughout the community, is to really reach low and help very low, extremely low renters be able to stay placed in these buildings. So it's been a really effective tool for us, and we hope that it continues to grow and that more people do subscribe to it. I can attest that it's been very valuable to keep our own properties financially stable. And then the last thing I want to state my support for is the CLT fund, which Minnie McMahon also addressed. We are part of the Greater Boston CLT network, and this fund, the $2 million we were able to get to pilot the fund, has also provided a very important resource. And part of it is to help CLTs acquire properties through acquisition, and a part of it is also we are piloting a program to do land transfers. And so we're really getting into the mechanics of how to do land transfers so people can age in place and potentially donate their properties or sell it at a discounted rate to land trusts or other entities. But this fund will help move that project forward, and it would be great to receive an additional $2 million, ideally to receive that every year as we grow the fund.
Thank you.
Yep, that's it for me. Thank you very much. We appreciate your support, and we really hope to be able to lift these strategies and continue to increase and fund these programs. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you. There's another person? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. We have come to time, so we're going to go into closing. I do have a couple of questions. One for you, Jeff, and particularly with mitigation funds. If you can talk to me about the process, just so that the community understands. I know that a lot of developers, typically when they're going into development, there's some sort of agreement between, or at least documented with BPDA. Any clarifications that you can make on the statements that I'm making right now is welcomed, of course. But also just telling me from like A to Z. One, how does it come about? What is the process? And two, how are you monitoring it to ensure that developers are following through with what they promise?
Yes, so thank you, Counselor. Just for the record, Jeff Thomas, Special Assistant to the Chief of Planning at the BPDA. So the mitigation is usually handled through our Article 80 process, the approvals process for small and large projects in the city of Boston. So we set up, during part of that process, we set up impact advisory groups using nominations from your body, nominations that are self-nominated, and that is nominations that are put forward by community members, and those are up to about 15 individuals. They will make recommendations through different settings with the developer to provide us feedback on how a development can be mitigated. Those agreements are codified in community benefits agreements or co-op agreements, depending on whether it's a large or small project. We have someone employed to track those community benefits and those mitigation agreements. Oftentimes different city departments will put in requests for mitigation as part of the Article 80 process. so funds to transportation improvements or housing, other things of that nature. We will not give a construction permit until we will not give out the permit until the proponent proves that they are going to follow through on these mitigation agreements. And that is tracked by our community benefits manager. So that's sort of the enforcement of those.
Okay. Thank you. In terms of the departments requesting for community mitigation funds, so the agreements may say, for example, street repair, sidewalk, lights, plants, housing, I don't know, or nonprofits, whatever it is. And how do you track, for example, if a development is in Roxbury, then how do you track that it's going to Roxbury if that was the agreement? If a city department is saying, I need the funds, then is the funds actually aggregated to say it went to Roxbury?
Yeah, so the benefits agreements are very specific. So typically the proponent is not paying into just funds that can be allocated anywhere. They're for specific projects, specific improvements. Typically it's related to, if it's a street improvement, it'd be near the project site. Or, for example, if a crosswalk needs to be improved at the corner that a development's going up, that's typically where those agreements are. That's how that's facilitated. So it's that mitigation money and whatever projects it's going to is typically very solid and agreed upon as we go through the process. So in Roxbury, for example, if we had a project, during that process, we would make sure that the mitigation that we are extracting from the development itself would be going into nearby improvements or things related to the area.
Thank you. There's this contention between developers and community where I think that in BPDA, like the triangle, where communities expecting transparent process and communication in terms of how these funds are being spent, as well as how these funds are being agreed upon. Obviously, it's not law. It's not something that they have to do, but it's some sort of goodwill. If you are going to develop here, you should contribute to the community, or you should be responsible about how you're developing here and how the community is impacted. And so the developers sometimes may push back and say, oh, BPDA said we don't have to, we don't even have to agree to give to nonprofits in this area. And then we'll go to BPDA and BPDA will say, of course not. We're not saying that. No. And then so there's all this push and pull, and then as a counselors, we get calls about these things, and I think that BPDA is working in good faith to make sure that these things are transparent. I've looked at the documents, I've read through these mitigation contracts, but I also feel like there needs to be the streamlined process with Article 80, and obviously that's being worked on. But then the community says, well, even with the advisory impact groups or the Article 80, the advisory council that's been put together, that's not transparent, and that doesn't include people on the ground or people that live in our areas. So for example, Roxbury did not have someone that people were familiar with or that lived in Roxbury in that advisory council group. And then also with the IAG, that folks are not actually being selected, that you're sort of cherry picking who you want to be on those groups. And I know that that's not the case because I've referred people have gotten selected, and I appreciate that the work that you do, being in BPDA and being in a highly a very low percentage of minorities employees. BPDA has one of the highest, it's like Boston Fire Department, 80% not minority groups, white people. And so where it's difficult for you to come in and you're just a person, you're just doing your job and you're doing a great job, but then for you to come in and have these conversations about inclusion, diversity, what's going on, IDP, how are you guys creating the transparent process that communicates what's going on in BPDA and community mitigation funds. How can we communicate that? How can we engage the community in understanding it better? And how are you working on diversity and inclusion to be able to say, yeah, okay, I'm a white guy, I care, I do my job, I do it well. How do we have these conversations in a transparent way so that it's comfortable for people, that people are in a safe space to be able to create this transparency and this culture of inclusion?
Yeah, I mean, you've identified a lot of the challenges that we're trying to work through every day. I think the nature of the development review process is sort of, it's a negotiation, and in negotiations, typically, there are louder voices than others sometimes. And I think that's what we're trying to do when we go through Article 80 reform, is to try to demystify those processes, make them more transparent, try to formalize it a little bit so that folks that are coming to the table have a better understanding of what they're getting into and how these things work. Also, just to simplify it, it's complicated. There's tons of meetings. There's a lot of time involved, and we know that the more time we spend doing meetings and community process, that drives out folks that might not be able to commit as much time. So we get the same faces and names kind of over and over again. So these are all things that we're working on. We're currently working to hire a consultant to help us review the Article 80 process, and we want to engage with the community later this summer and fall about these things. So we're very committed. We understand that IAGs can be difficult. I think Council has come to us multiple times with that feedback. So I appreciate your feedback. I think we're just looking forward to working with you as best we can moving forward on making these processes more transparent and reliable.
Thank you so much for that thoughtful answer. I really appreciate how you guys are handling Boston Water and Sewer. It started with, oh my God, we're not being heard, and what's happening, right? Like, there is this culture of disenfranchising communities of color, right? Like in historically. And then today it's like, okay, how do we grow as we maintain and sustain what we have currently? So we go into this community process and we're like, okay, this land, what do we do with it? And the community's like, I want parking lots. Like, no, you're not getting. For those watching, no to the parking lot. And so, then you have like we need housing, and we need affordable commercial spaces. We need affordable home ownership. We need some parking for those commercial spaces, and we need some parking for families, for bigger families, right? And then people with disability. There's all these other nuances. We also need safe transportation for them, and we need thriving business corridors. We need all of these things. In comes in Jonathan Rebecca, listened, and came back with a very responsive, very comprehensive process. I was blown away. I was impressed. And I am not like the judge or the person with a say-all, but I was very grateful. And I look forward to more of that. So appreciate you, appreciate Chief Dillon. Quite sure you were somewhere pulling strings. So I thank you for that process, and we look forward to more of that. I look forward to more conversations on housing and looking at those parcels, how we're going to continue to develop. As a city, we have to continue to develop. It's not a thriving city if we can't develop. How do we do it so that it's equitable? How do we look at the inventory? Everybody's like, I want a piece, I want a piece, I want a piece, with such a deprived community, right? Especially communities of color. There's been so much historic harm. How do we do that thoughtfully and intentionally in a way that we're actually making true impact for those who need us most, right? Especially for those who were historically taken from or disenfranchised. So those are my thoughts so far. I think as I refine my work and my delivery as politician, but also a policymaker, I am hoping to continue to build with you and do this work in a way that's truly impactful. And I hope that you take so far my interaction with you for its true intention. And I'm grateful for your work. Thank you. Councilor Mejia, you have the floor for any closing remarks.
Thank you. So I wanted to just echo some of my gratitude to you all for your hard work. This is what partnership looks like, right? And so I think it's important for us to continue these dialogues beyond the budget season. I really do think that we need to start doing business differently and really leaning in and having ongoing kind of like, where do we go from here? I do want to echo some of the concerns around the BPDA. I feel like we're almost there, but we still have a little bit of shortcuts that I think we're still trying to take when it comes to community voice. So I've been hearing from some folks, particularly Shirley Jones, who is in Ward 15. There's been a lot of issues of development happening in that area, and it seems like the BPDA is not responding to community voice and input. It seems very transactional, like a checking off the box, where you come in and you have these alleged structures in place, but yet projects are being approved, community members are not feeling heard. So I still think that there is some opportunity there for growth and to fix those issues when it comes to how we approve the process. So I just want to name that as something that I will continue to fight for. And then I just think overall, like, you know, Councillor Lara always says that the personal is political, and all of these things are interconnected. And I hope that you know that when we come here and advocating on behalf of our constituents, many of us have experienced housing instability, so for us it's not what we've learned about in the textbooks, you know, or a theory or something that, you know, it's profound. And I think that oftentimes when we advocate from a place of being there and been there and done that type of scenario, and that there's urgency. And I think that as a city, you know, we have a bold mayor, right? We are entering into this type of way of doing business, but now we all have to like roll in the same direction to meet the moment, because otherwise we're going to be placed and displaced to Rosendale, not Rosendale, Randolph, Stoughton, Brockton. Like, it is, you see the migration patterns. It is really intentional that Black and brown people and poor people in particular can no longer afford to live in the city. And while I do appreciate the intent around building, I think we need to start building with more intentionality around keeping people here. The people who can't afford to live here, the ones that are making $31,000 a year. If we're really serious about meeting this moment, we're going to have to do things differently. And that is what I'm looking forward to, working with you to figure out what that looks like. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Mejia. Just wanted to, Councilor wanted to read into record, she wrote me an entire book, but I will only read the first sentence. Councilor Lou Jen extends her apologies for not being here and supports just about everything that you are doing, Chief, and looking forward to working with you. We'll review the video, left her contact information. All right, so for those of you watching, contact Councilor Lou Jen for any inquiries on housing, and she's looking forward to hearing from you as well. And I just wanted to thank your team. I know that I didn't get to bring you on, and for Grow Boston, don't shoot me. I forget your names, every single one of you. So I'm so sorry, but Miss Shawnee Fletcher, you're amazing. Love your work with Grow Boston. And Miss Johnson. You are phenomenal, and my office absolutely loves you. Thank you for all of your hard work, and team with all the parcel work that you're doing in the community. Appreciate you all. Look forward to working with you. And this meeting is adjourned. But if you have any comments, any Do you want to talk some more for 30 minutes?
No,
No?
I don't. But I do,
Right.
before we close though, I think a lot of the work that we highlighted in the beginning of this hearing and that we got done in fiscal year 23, we did it in partnership, and I think we did it the right way. So I want to thank you as well.
Thank you so very much. Mr. Terrell, I want to learn more about it because we definitely want investigators. We want more of that in communities.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to give a shout out to the Fair Housing Commission staff who over the last 7 or 8 weeks, all 4 of them, in light of all the people that left the commission over the past 7 or 8 months, they stayed, did the work. That's
you only
why
have 4 people?
Well, that's why I have 6 vacancies to fill.
Okay. Sounds like you need 20, but okay.
But all those folks stayed and kept the commission intact and did incredible, legendary work to keep the commission going until we can get fully staffed up again. I just wanted to call attention to Connor Locke, Maggie Callahan, Nicholas Fuller, and Ty Bayless for their hard work over the last fiscal year. It was a tough year for them.
You're too kind. Thank you so much. I look forward to supporting you in increasing capacity and whatever else that I need to know for my office as well to help you do that.
Thank you. We'll be in touch.
Meeting adjourned.